Welcome to DAX Machina. Join us as we explore the mysteries of this world. Cryptids, monsters, macabre tales, and horror stories abound. Could they be true? Are monsters real?
Good evening, folks, and thank you for joining us for another edition of DAX Machina. Joining me in the studio tonight are my brothers from other mothers, Robbie Wildman Rains, also known as Scalp Hunter for those in the know, and then we got the tiny pocket doc himself, Carrie Pocket Doc Davis. Thank you guys for joining us. It is going to be an awesome show tonight, folks. We have got so much to talk about tonight. We might actually go a little longer than 2 hours because we've got so much material to cover. And we are really going to be digging the rabbit hole deep on this one. So hope you got your tinfoil hat lining, tinfoil lining on your hat.
Yeah, I've shovel.
I've got the bald spot that just reflects the creepy rays from the weird satellite. But
Doc, hold on, let me blind you.
Yeah, gonna make Doc snarf whatever it is he's drinking there.
May or may not.
May or may not.
Werewolf said, "Hey, Doc."
Yeah, we've got a huge crowd in the house. All right. Country Board Cryptids, Werewolf 5674. Hi, Meg. West Coast Dogman Project. Shane, what's up, buddy? Cowboys 5 Rings here.
Yeah.
Darcy's Wiki. Toshi the Wolf. AJ Congan. Hey, AJ, what's up, brother? Northwoods Cryptid in the house. We're just waiting for his ex-wife insult. It'll make the night. Tombstone's here. Lanita. Jake Light. Steve Padden. Hey, buddy. Steve Padden's another cop from here in Missouri. Good dude. David By's in the house. What's up, brother? I got to hang out with David at the convention up in Lexington. That was a good time. He is a good dude. We got a ton of people in the house already, and it's still growing. So, folks, thank you guys for jumping in with us tonight. We are gonna be rocking the Dogman lore tonight. We are gonna be going places we haven't really talked about much before. Although we have done many Dogman stories before, this one isn't just encounters. This is digging back through the history, through the ages, and pulling up where this legend, where these creatures emerged from. Because I think there is more mystery than history. I think it is actual legit creatures that we're going to be talking about. I'm a firm believer in Dogman. I've seen one. That you don't get much more firm believer than when you watch one run away from you. We've talked about that encounter here. We've got to get Nick Valente on the show again, so him and I can talk about that, our time in LBO. But that's not what this is about tonight. We are digging into the history of this subject and doing the full dig into different parts of this origin. And there are a lot, far more than people realize. I had a guy popped into one of our groups the other day. It was actually the North American Dogman Project, and I'd posted something, and I don't remember what it was. It was some little article, and he posted a comment about us being idiots because Dogman doesn't exist. There's no proof for it. There's just as much proof for Dogman as there's for Bigfoot, maybe even more in some cases, because we've got obvious evidence of cover-ups covering up the deaths caused by Dogman. So, I just went ahead and booted that guy from the group. We don't need that kind of crap. If you don't believe, you don't believe, and nothing I'm ever going to say is going to convince you. But those of us that have had experiences, no proof is necessary. Those of us that have seen something or had something close by, those of us that have been in the field and heard those strange calls out in the woods, we don't need somebody to say, "Oh, that doesn't exist." You nothing happened. You're just making it up, because we're not. There are far too many accounts that are coming forward that are backing this up. Boys, how you guys doing tonight?
I'm doing good. How you doing there, Doc?
I'm tired. How are y'all doing?
Doc's down in the great state of Texas.
Yeah,
down in Tejas.
I drove 14 hours yesterday, so yeah.
You drove 14 hours with a bloody mannequin in your back seat. I am shocked. You didn't get pulled over.
I did, yeah. And the mannequin was wrapped up in murder plastic too, so even more. I told my wife,
don't worry about that little guy.
Would have been even better if you'd have wrapped it in black plastic and put it on the roof.
Yeah, I said I don't know if I was more disturbed the fact that I didn't get pulled over, or how easy it would have been to transport a freaking body in my back seat. So equally disturbed.
Yeah. Well, Pork and Beans asks, so can you guys go through your encounters again for those who have not heard briefly? What happened to me was Nick Valente and I were in LBL, Land Between the Lakes, and we were digging into some of the places where some of these stories come from. And on near the end of the fourth day, we were driving down a back road coming out of Demumbers Bay, and we were driving about 2 miles an hour, just kind of down this little gravel section of road, looking through the woods. And lo and behold, I turned my head, and there one was. It was standing with its hand on a tree, looking right at us. I'm like punching Nick in the arm. I can't even talk. I'm like just pointing. Didn't take my eyes off of it. I got about a 10 to 15 second look, but the way time dilates when your adrenaline just dumps all at once, it could have been longer. But it didn't seem like that long a time because it just seemed to happen so quickly. Nick slams on the brakes, looks over, and sees what I'm pointing at. It basically, once it realizes we're looking at it, it takes its hand down from the tree, kind of looks dead at me for a second, and then turns and does this weird kind of loping run where it just kind of popped to the side, popped to the side, popped to the side, and then went down a ravine. We dive out of the car, go over there, and you can see the leaf litter where the leaves have been disturbed, but the ground was too hard packed to find any tracks other than disturbance down the ravine. And it went down the ravine. We weren't following. There was no way. And of course, we were unarmed. We're like, probably not the best idea to be chasing this thing. But I did go right to the tree where I saw it, and I put my hand up, and it was just a little above where I would be comfortable. So I estimated it to be 6.5 to 7 feet tall, completely black.
That's a big one. Hang on, I gotta say hey to somebody, or I'll get myself in trouble. Hey, Lindsay.
Hi, Lindsay.
One of my coworkers is on watching.
Oh, awesome.
So say hey, Lindsay.
Steve Patton says, Doc, you didn't burn down the rental car again, did you?
And yeah, that's what I said. Not this time I didn't. So it did pretty good. That thing had a back massager in it. I was like, that's pretty rad.
Hell yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Fancy.
But each of you guys have had not necessarily Dogman, but cryptid encounters in your lives that have brought you into this field. And not just because we became friends, but because something kind of seemed to just draw us together. And I got to say, I've met some amazing people through this journey as a writer and a cryptozoologist. But there are a handful of guys when we met, we just clicked, and within minutes, it was like we'd known each other all our lives. And I'm happy to say that Robbie and Doc and Anthony are people like that. Anthony's not with us tonight; he wasn't feeling well, so hopefully he'll get to feeling better, and we'll see him on. Oh yeah, that's right. I don't have a show on Saturday because I got the convention.
Yep.
So, Robbie, you want to tell us, like the Cliff Notes version of what got you into it?
I don't know if there's a Cliff Notes version of my encounter. Long and short of it, back in the early '80s, I was at my great grandparents' house, just right across the road from where I live now. 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. It was already getting dark, summertime. I get up to go out on the front porch with my mom and grandparents, great grandparents were. And as I reached to shut the TV off, I looked out through the kitchen on the back porch, and I noticed something looking in the back door at me. First, I didn't really know what it was. Dark. I don't know what color the hair was. It's just dark colored because it was nighttime. But the face was real dark. The eyes were sunk in, real conical shaped head. As I looked, I started, kind of doing this. And as I was doing this, if I'd look this way, it would do this. And I go to the other side, and it'd do this. And then it just started swaying back and forth. And at that time, as my, 8-year-old brain kicked in, is like, that's not a reflection. That's something looking in on me. And without getting into a lot of explaining, the backside of the house was pretty high off the ground. So the bottom of the floor was probably 5.5 feet off the ground. Top of the storm door, probably 10 feet off the ground. And it was bent down looking in. So when it stood straight up, you could see like from here down below the top of the door. So you're probably talking something, around the 11-foot mark.
That's a big bastard.
Yeah.
And
I've
that would
always said,
explain why your grandfather moved the cattle up close to the house at night.
yep. I've always said
Man.
between 10 and 11 and a half feet. Because like I said, it was dark and it kept moving up and down and moving around. So, but the top of that storm door was a good 10 and a half to 11 feet off the ground. And when it stood up, just above its, from its eyes below is where I was seeing, in the middle of its abdomen was right up above the bottom metal panel of the door, so I could see it through the glass. At about 8 years old, that'll wake you up. That'll give you a healthy dose of reality.
Toshi the Wolf says that's a get a cannon kind of critter.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely was. That's not my only encounter, but that was definitely the scariest, and only scary, I guess, because of the age I was. But there was no menace in it. I think it was just curious. So that's my encounter, Doc, or the Cliff Note version of my encounter.
I've never had a cryptid encounter. Do definitely believe in them because there's just so much evidence out there. All I've had is paranormal encounters. So, but enough to definitely make me a believer in that as well. Never was a non-believer or even a skeptic. But yeah, I've had several paranormal encounters. So, but never a cryptid yet. I mean, as much as I get out in the woods when I'm off work, it's probably bound to happen at some point in time, especially out in Colorado. As long as
you kind of live in the butt crack of nowhere. You're liable to have one up close to your house.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. And it's like I was talking to a buddy of mine here, and he was talking about how they when one of his buddies was a gunship sensor operator on Spectres, on Spookies AC-130s in Afghanistan. It's what me and you talked about last night, late DA, when I got in, and they were seeing big creatures. They thought it were bears on their FLIR, their forward-looking infrared on their sensors in the mountains of Afghanistan, where there are no bears. And so that kind of
ruled out bears.
Yeah, those are not bears. Yeah, because the bears don't walk and run like a bipedal, being. So
and they were catching those on FLIR.
Yeah,
that is badass.
Yeah. So pretty crazy, man. Pretty crazy.
It's funny how much independent corroboration. This isn't just one or two people having sightings. These are coming from all over the world. You can bury your head in the sand and claim that none of this exists, but the overwhelming preponderance of evidence, as defense attorneys used to hate to hear me say, but based on the preponderance of evidence, you have to accept they're out there. There is just way too much. People have been sent to prison for life on eyewitness testimony, yet it's somehow not good when it comes to cryptids.
Yeah. And then, 1980 CNH says, "Hey, Doc, there's some down here in Mississippi where we're both from." I know absolutely are, because my middle brother over a decade ago had his own encounter down there near Red Creek, up near Wiggins, out in the woods where he has property. So, and he was very hesitant to, even like we all talk about on the show, he was very hesitant to come forward with a story for fear of people thinking he's a nut job. And he is the most sane, relatively speaking. He is my brother. But as far as that stuff goes, I know he wouldn't lie about anything like that. He has nothing to gain from it. But, he had an encounter down at his place, down in the woods. So, yeah. I just hope I could react appropriately if I ever saw one, and not just poop my pants, So,
well, I that thought did go through my head when I saw Dogman. there was almost a brown pants moment.
Yeah. Like, first you say it, then you're going to do it. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, you ain't wrong.
Yeah.
And folks, this is just a tip of the iceberg. The three of us sitting here talking about that I've seen multiple people in chat saying the one I saw was this, the one I saw was this. There are people in the chat that have had firsthand experiences, and folks, this is a place where you are safe to talk about your experiences. No one is going to judge you. We do believe they're out there. Without a doubt, I believe they're out there, and anybody that needs to tell their story, we are happy to listen, because I know how difficult it can be to have someone not believe you, especially if the people you care about, when they're like, oh no, you were drunk, or you imagined it, or it was a nightmare.
Right.
Yeah, this is a place where you can talk about it and nobody's going to think bad of you. 1980 CNH says let me put that back up. He said, hey, DA, do you think the ones that Doc just talked about would have been the Barmanu? Yes, I do. I think it was very much so the Barmanu. I've talked to some people who not only were deployed there, but some people who were raised there, and they all said, yeah, there are things in those mountains that you can't easily explain away. Yeah, David By says whatever was checking us out at Lexington, we had something going on. Speaking of that, before we jump into that, I want to share something with you folks. Now I'm going to get the girls back on from Blondes and Booze, so we can talk about this at a greater detail. But I want to show you something, and these are non-edited photos. Only thing I did was change the contrast. Now, this started from, I think, this image. So it's slightly cropped. You can see me in it. And I think if you look at that, you can kind of see something in the darkness of the trees. And I will zoom in on it. And I don't even think Doc has seen this.
I was just about that. I don't think Doc is. You showed it to me after the last show.
Now, the next image, you're going to see it. You can kind of see something there. But this next image, these aren't pixelations. These aren't something, that because of the leaf litter. These are distinctive. Look at that, right in the middle, right to middle center left. That's a face. A face of what? I don't know. And it looks like there might possibly be two others, one above it and one to the right. I can't explain how those got there. But that would have been the tree that stuff was getting thrown at my wife.
That's interesting.
And that, you can see the pixelations, but you can also see that the area that we're talking about is not pixels. I don't know what that is. I really don't. But it's something that was behind us and was just captured on film. Northwood says an adult with two younger ones could possibly be. We have no idea. Pork and Bean says looks like a zombie. David By says looks almost like a gorilla. George Jennings says I didn't see anything. Well, I'll put it back up there. I mean, it's there. I get it. Not everybody sees everything. Some people don't do the trick of the eye thing. When I was a kid, they had all those posters where you had to let your vision go unfocused. I could never see any of those. I saw this right away.
That's crazy.
Monster Radio says, got to be careful if you see a Bigfoot that looks that ape-like. Yeah, because I think that one, it almost looks like the face is kind of elongated. Just there in 66 says you have to see it bigger. Let me see if I can pull it up over on my other screen, and I will blow it up. I think I can do it. Give me just a second, guys. Talk amongst yourselves.
Discuss
it. I got to find that image real quick.
So, yeah, Doc, your paranormal stuff.
Yeah.
Is it been more like I know you told us the stories about the things with you and Angie over at the castle that time.
Yeah.
Is it just been like stuff like that with that family related issue you said, or has it been stuff that was like totally, this ain't related to me in no other way, it's just something that happened?
Yeah, I mean, when I was stationed at Columbus Air Force Base in early mid '90s, before I went to Bragg, there was stuff. I would be there all night long. There's stuff there that the cardiac monitors would get turned on in the trauma room. Toilets would flood themselves. Call lights would get pulled upstairs. The people I've never heard this one. I saw all the other stuff and encountered all that, but people would hear babies crying from the old L&D labor and delivery area. I witnessed a stethoscope tapping back and forth on a scale. Like it was on that cross piece on the scale. We'd hang the stethoscope up there. It was just, I heard something clicking in the triage room, and I went in there, and that thing was just sitting there bouncing back and forth like somebody sitting there just flicking it with their finger. And I was like, oh, yeah, I got somewhere else.
Oh, look at the time. I got to go.
It's time me to get to have my lunch.
I think I'm going to be able to zoom this in. So let me split the screen. I'm going to put it up right there in the middle with us over on the side. I think you can see my cursor moving around right there. That's the area that looks most like a face.
Yeah.
Oh,
you can see the nose, you can see the eyes and the mouth. Now, if you zoom out a little bit and look, it looks kind of like another, like partially obscured one right here. You can see both eyes and what looks like could be a mouth. And then I don't know what that is there. It could be something, could not. But the one that's the most telling is this one. And I will zoom in closer on that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's not pixelization because you can still see the lines.
I wonder if that guy Norm knows could clean those up any.
He might be able to. I could send him the image. But that's what I'm talking about. Nick says it looks evil. Richie says I can see them. Yeah, when they sent me that picture, Krista sent me that picture. She said, I think there's something above you guys in the trees, and she circled it. And I even on when I blew it up on my computer screen, even then the original, the dark one, I could still see something. I'm like, what the hell is that? When I blew it up, it looked like a face. So I started playing with the contrast and brought that up, and I was like, oh crap. Yeah, I need to. Northwoods Cryptid says compared to that, my ex, that image compared to my ex, that image doesn't look evil.
There it is. It's not a show till Northwoods makes one of his.
That's right. AJ says, DA, I saw one between the first two first. Yeah, I can't say definitively, but there was something pacing us in the woods there that night. It walked around the entire because the bonfire was surrounded by woods on three sides. And the open side was an open field that led up to a campground, which was about 50, 60 yards away. And then the ranch was beyond that, probably another 40 yards. David By was there. He could describe the terrain. It was all uphill from the fire. So we were way down, away from the ranch, away from the lighting and everything. And from the moment we got down there, we could hear something walking in the woods. And I had a pretty bright flashlight, 3,500 lumens, and I couldn't find anything. But then at one point when I was making my presentation, we were talking about Bigfoot, something started chucking stuff at my wife and at Krista. And something landed pretty close to between them. And it came from the direction of that tree.
It's like, hey, tell him to quit talking about us.
Yeah. Shut up, fat boy. Shut up. Somebody hit that hat and knock it off its head. But yeah, that's just something that I just find particularly compelling. I mean, it's really, really kind of bizarre. And wanted to throw that in before we dig in. When we start talking about Dogman, we start looking into the history of Dogman. It extends back centuries. It's not something that's a recent phenomenon. The seeing creatures with the head of dogs is not new.
Nope.
It dates back centuries. When you look at ancient Egypt, one of the first representations you can find of dog-headed men, and I guarantee the first thing that comes to most people's minds is Anubis. But I found something that actually might be a little older. It's an Egyptian god called Werewolf. And he was originated in Upper Egypt, which means it's one of the earliest gods to be worshipped. Probably, maybe even predate, I can't pronounce Kintamintayu, another god of the Abydos necropolis. But Wepwet was popular throughout Egypt, but as Osiris grew in popularity, Anubis took on more of a funerary role. Uh, but he didn't entirely disappear. Wepwet was associated in Upper Egypt and was given the honor of going before the king during many ritual processions. A god placed before the god king is something insane. But he predates Osiris. The procession of Wepwet initiated mysteries of Osiris as a god of the dead. The name Wepwet means opener of ways or opener of roads. It's thought to refer to the paths of the underworld, but may also refer to paths chosen in life. It seems to have been linked to the power of the living pharaoh. In the Book of the Dead, and that which is in the underworld, he leads the deceased through the underworld and guards over them on their perilous journey. He was also thought to act as a scout for the army, opening the path for them to proceed. So this, and Wepwet is not a jackal-headed god; he's a wolf-headed god. But that he has direct ties to Anubis, and may have actually been somewhat supplanted by Anubis, but he does predate Anubis and even Osiris. So Wepwet we're talking early Egyptian kingdoms, earliest known examples of Egyptian gods. So maybe they saw something. This is not a phenomenon that's unheard of. And so, what do you guys think? What do you guys think about Wepwet as possible, maybe even an origin for this?
I I actually heard maybe not the first time I heard of it, but one of the, I guess, more prevalent times that I've heard about him. He was really used heavily in another book series by Chris Fox, and he really got deep into that mythology, and pretty much the same thing that you were saying, Da. He was actually one of the elder gods, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
The first, was it Osiris, Set, Wepwet, Ra, and maybe one other or two others, something like that. But he was supposedly I don't know if he was the god of fighting or however you want, but he was supposed to be really deadly with weapons, a master of weapons, couldn't be bested in battle type
Yeah,
thing.
he was a war deity, wasn't he, Robbie? Like a war god.
Yes, something like Ares would be, or something like that, from the Norse mythology, or I guess who would Greek be in that? Maybe Apollo would be the in the Roman pantheon. But yeah, he was really, really prevalent early Egyptian times before Anubis became, I guess, more popular. I guess gods have popularity contests too.
Yeah. Well, the popularity is expressed in the number of worshipers. Him being an older god, I can see how he would be, kind of left to the background, as opposed to some of the newer, more commonly talked about or commonly interpreted gods. So Wepwet may have realistically been one of these dog-headed creatures.
Yep. And the Egyptians had a fascination because just about all of their gods had some kind of animal head for the most part.
Right.
You had what was the one with the head of the hawk? What was his name?
Ra and Horus.
Horus, that's the one I was thinking of. Then Anubis. There was one that had a cat's head. They had a real fascination with
Bast.
What we would consider a were person or a were creature. So like you said, when we get into some of this other stuff, you can trace a lot of that stuff back to the early Egyptian times, where people were already making that connection. So why were they making that connection? Did they see something that led them to make that connection? Kind of curious that you get that all the way back, 10,000 years ago.
Yeah. But some say as much as 25,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, as much as that, kind of digs into what we're talking, then we've also got the other side of that, of the paths of the dead. We've got Anubis. Robbie, you want to start that out off about Anubis?
I, Anubis, uh, in like we said, part of the ancient pantheon. He came in a little bit later than that, but like many of the ancient Egyptian deities, Anubis assumed different roles in the various contexts. He was depicted as the protector of graves, which I think you mentioned that a little bit earlier,
Mm-hmm.
as early as the first dynasty, which was 3100 to 2900 BC. Anubis was also an embalmer, so which goes more, he had that whole king of the underworld type uh, thing going on. He was, I don't know if he was more of the gatekeeper or if he was actually but he was replaced by Osiris in
Mm-hmm.
his role. Okay, so he was Lord of the Underworld until Osiris took over. One of his prominent roles was God who ushered in the souls to the afterlife. So I'm thinking he was more like uh, Hades, where he brought them into the underworld
Mm-hmm.
after they died. So he was kind of like a guide, I would assume. Uh, he attended the weighing scales when people weighing the heart of people after they died to determine where they went once they died.
Mm-hmm.
He determined whether the soul will be allowed to enter the realm of the dead. Anubis was one of the most frequently depicted and mentioned gods in the Egyptian pantheon. However, no relevant myth has been involved with him.
Mm-hmm.
He depicted in black, a color that symbolizes regeneration, life, the soil of the Nile River, and the discoloration of the corpse after embalming. Anubis is associated with his brother, Wetwawet, another Egyptian god portrayed with a dog's head or a wolf's head, or in canine form, but with gray or white fur. Historians assume that the two figures were eventually combined. Anubis' female counterpart was Anput. His daughter is a serpent goddess, uh, Kebashet. I think that's how that's pronounced. So it seems like a lot of the Egyptian gods kind of
Embodied
had
some sort of animal.
with that, but they also were interchangeable at times. Like Anubis may have started off in this role, but then Osiris took that role over, and Anubis went to another role,
Mm.
and it seemed like they were interchangeable
Well,
about things.
it strikes me funny that both Wepawet and Anubis, being dog-headed, are associated with the underworld, and even now there's so many sightings of dogmen in or around cemeteries.
Hmm.
Mm.
Makes me wonder what
Yeah,
kind of
there's
connection there can be to that.
a lot of connections in cemeteries. So
And
that keeper.
modern bodies are embalmed, so there's no way they would eat it.
Well,
Yeah, and I
that
mean Anubis was like a protector of the graves, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, sometimes he was depicted even as an embalmer, which would again another cemetery graveyard reference there too.
Which is I find really really bizarre. I mean, are they there to protect the dead, or are they there to guide souls along the pathways? There's so much mystery surrounding this. George Jennings says hellhound. I don't think they're hellhounds. I think you're far more anthropomorphized to be considered a hellhound. Hellhounds remain on all fours. These things are very much on two legs. Um,
Yeah, because Wepawet was like he was almost like the boatman on the river Styx, right?
kind
Type
of.
of thing.
Yeah, he
yeah,
Yeah, kind of.
opened the way to the underworld.
So he was down here, and then Anubis was supposed to be protecting the graves, but then he became
Mhm.
the Lord,
well,
like Robbie said, the Lord of
yeah.
the underworld.
If you're looking for that Greek connection, you get looking at Hades being the Lord of the underworld and Carrion being the ferryman.
Right,
For his
exactly.
Anubis was that, and then, but like I said, it seemed like it was interchangeable because it did say in
Right.
that eventually Anubis became the one that would like usher him in and would be there at the weighing ceremony, the weighing of someone's heart to decide whether they were going to be able to enter the underworld or do. It didn't really say what would be done if they didn't get to enter it, but
Right.
Right. And again, we've got the modern ties of seeing so many dogmen in or around cemeteries. Even the original Beast of Bray Road sightings, the security guard at that church, or I think it was a church or a college, reported seeing one digging in a burial mound.
Yeah, I remember that.
Wow. Damn.
So no matter where they're at, they seem to be almost commonly seen, most seen near cemeteries. I mean, I know where I was at in Land Between the Lakes, it wasn't far from a cemetery, maybe a mile. And when I was filming at that cemetery, the Nickel Cemetery, I could hear something walking in the woods around me. Could never catch it on camera or get a glimpse of it, but there was definitely something walking in the woods around that cemetery. Uh, Shane from West Coast Dogman says Ryan Tremblay brought up a good point the other day. The Dogman sightings in the 90s were a lot smaller compared to nowadays. The Dogmen look like Arnold on steroids. Are they genetically modified? We're going to get to that. We're working up to that. So we're kind of still dealing with the past at the moment. But when we get to more modern times, we are definitely going to be talking about that possibility.
Yeah, somebody even brought up St. Christopher, like we were talking about before the show.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. In fact, that was actually going to be my next jump since Robbie had done Anubis. Do you want to talk about St. Christopher?
Yeah, I mean, let me pull that thing up there that I had it up here earlier. Yeah, let me pull my notes up here. It was it's funny because if you look at he's called the dog-headed icon, and we had made mention of the cyanocephali. So the Orthodox, he's an Orthodox icon. So and it's so funny. I've been Orthodox for God, let me see, 22 years now, and so it's funny how I never had seen this dog-headed icon in any of the Orthodox churches I've been in, and it was a dog-headed warrior saint, and it says it conjures fantastical stories of wolves, but it was actually in churches all over. There was one. It was a dog-headed man from Lycia, and it's a gigantic size. That's the thing too. It was not a normal size. It was a giant. It was dressed in battle gear. It was dressed in warriors' gear, and so the Roman Catholic Church, because they're in the Great Schism in the 10th century, I believe, in 54, where the Bishop of Rome became the Pope, broke off from the Orthodox faith. The Roman Catholic Church, actually, the whole feast of St. Christopher was suppressed with the Vatican II modernization. And St. Christopher is actually still continues to be one of the most popular saints in Catholicism. But they kind of suppressed all that. The church did, the Catholic Church did, because I think they have the negative or occult connotations along with that because of what we now call the werewolf or the wolf man. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's pretty funny, and they're all over. If you look in Orthodox, from Orthodoxy going forward, from its beginnings, they are in there. And then there's even a 15th century print. It shows Jesus surrounded by a bunch of cyanocephalic warriors, and so it's pretty interesting. Let me see if I can pull this image up, and I can put it up on the.
Why are you pulling that up, Doc? You said, either one of y'all remember the old show back in the early 80s on Fox, Werewolf?
Yeah.
With John Day York. They actually had an episode dealing with St. Christopher. I think it was in the.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I think it was either in like the end of the first season or the beginning of the second season. But there's a whole episode. I've actually got that whole entire series on DVD. I'll try to make a copy of it and send it to y'all so you can watch. Okay. That was just when you pop that image up, it actually showed that image.
That's pretty cool. Let me see if I can add this. It says upload. Let me see here. I'm trying to upload this damn thing. Damn it, Bobby.
And that comes from Catholic iconography that, St. Christopher was of the race of the dogmen before his the race of the dog-headed men before his conversion. So right there, they're saying there was a race of dog-headed men. That's straight out of Catholic legends.
Yeah, and then the Orthodox faith predates that, so it was even in the Orthodoxy, like I said. So I can't pull that image up, DA, for some reason. Is it under? Wait, never mind. I'm looking at it. I was trying to get it in video clips, man. My bad.
No problem.
Damn it, Bobby. It's not pulling up.
Which one you want me to pull up?
It's one with Jesus surrounded by a bunch of the cyanocephali. Here, let me just give you the link, and you can scroll down.
Okay.
You can see it. It's actually pretty cool because I never had.
And I'll share it.
I never had seen this print myself, so it's pretty cool. Here you go. Try that.
Okay, give me just a second.
Pretty interesting stuff, man. Dealing with this. So,
which print are you wanting? The first one?
It's down quite a bit. It's 1, 2, 3.
I don't see if I can do it.
Oh, I see it.
The fifth one. Yeah, it's the fifth one down.
All right, I will have that up on screen in just a second.
Yeah, it wouldn't let me. Upload it for some reason.
I need to change from having you guys as co-host to have you as admin status. That way you'll be able to do everything.
Yeah, so that's a 15th century print right there, which is actually pretty interesting.
Yes, it is.
So, yeah, I mean, there's even talking about St. Christopher in the Bible. It says the relation of the dog to the periphery appears several places in the Bible. They're seen licking the sores on Job's skin. They're excluded. From Jerusalem, they eat from the body of foreign Queen Jezebel. The giant Goliath himself creates the St. Christopher dog giant foreigner analogy when he asked David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" So there's a lot of stuff in there, and talking about how he crosses over a river, stories of water crossings, and it's I don't know. It's really interesting how there's things. There's a lot of, if you look at all the religions here, look at ancient Egypt, look at even Christianity, there's all some sort of reference to some sort of dog-headed warrior, so it's kind of interesting. I don't know.
Well, then you're talking about, Greek Orthodox. You mentioned the Greeks. What about King Lycian?
Yep. I know that one.
Another prime example.
Lycia, that was known as and there was one called Lycopolis or Lycropolis. That's like city of wolves.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Is what it basically translates to.
Well, in Greek mythology, Lycian may well be the first of the species.
Yep.
He was the king of Arcadia, and he tested Zeus's omniscience to see if Zeus truly was omniscient by serving him the roasted flesh of his own son, Nyctimus. To see if Zeus would catch it. Well, not only did Zeus catch it, he cursed him. He cursed him to become a wolf and killed his offspring. And Nyctimus was restored to life by Zeus. Despite being, a horrific dude, I mean, the guy, murdered his own son and cooked him. He's also remembered as a culture hero for some reason. He was believed to have founded the city of Lycosura, which established the cult of Zeus Lycius, and to have started the tradition of the Lycian Games.
And his name is actually where we get lycanthrope from.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Lycian is where lycanthrope comes from.
And check out this post from Miriam. It says, in Islam, our Prophet Muhammad met with dogmen. It's in our literature, but not in English.
That's awesome.
That's
another ancient religious tie-in. Now, that we could jump into talks about the Nephilim. We could talk about different varieties of demon or things like that. But the fact that these are showing up in multiple religions, someone even mentioned earlier that they showed up in Chinese iconography, Chinese religion back in 660 BC. So this isn't new, and it's happening all over the world. Now, whether you want to say it's Nephilim or whatever your particular religion calls them. We are seeing connections in multiple mythologies all across the world. Now,
Yeah.
which brings me to one of my favorite ones. I'm going to let Robbie take this one away because he really likes this subject. But we're going to start talking about the Fenris wolf.
All right. Fenris wolf, or Fenrir, as in Old Norse some people call it, or I'm not even going to try to pronounce it the way it's supposed to be pronounced. Basically, was one of Loki's children,
mm-hmm.
and this is like we talked about in the first of the show. This could very well be the first Dogman, werewolf, however you want to look at it, legend or creature that was ever written about. You start getting Hell and is that how it's pronounced? His mother, is it Hell or
Hell? Yeah.
Okay.
Or in some versions, Hela.
Yeah. So Hell, whichever one you want to use, and Loki had several children. One of them was the world serpent. One of them was Fenrir. So Fenrir and the world serpent were siblings, but get back to where it was a second ago. Hold on, I've lost my place. Sorry.
No problem. We got time, brother.
Yeah.
I know y'all boys down in South Crackalacky are a little slow.
I'm a little slow. Give me a time. Give me a second. Words, they give me a hard time.
I'm just astounded you can read without your lips moving.
Hey, I'm good. I think.
Nothing but love, brother.
Hey, I'm talented. What can I say?
I can feel the love.
We'll bring up the Britannica article instead of the Wikipedia. There's a little bit more information on it. Right. Fenrir, also called a Fenrir sulfur. I don't know if that's how I pronounce it right, but it was a monstrous wolf of Norse mythology. He was the son of the demonic god Loki and the gigantus Angrboda. Okay. Fearing Fenrir's strength and knowing that only evil could be expected of him, the gods bound him with magical chain made of the sound of a cat's footsteps. That's interesting. I don't know if I've ever heard that part before. And the beard of a woman and the breath of a fish. And other occult elements. When the chain was placed upon him, Fenrir bit off the hand of the god Tyr, and he was gagged with a sword and was destined to lie bound in the rock until Ragnarok, when he will break his bonds and fall upon the gods. According to one version of the myth, Fenrir will devour the sun, and in Ragnarok he will fight against the chief god Odin and swallow him. Odin's son Vidar will avenge his father, stabbing the wolf in the heart, according to one account, and tearing his jaws asunder, according to another. Fenrir figures prominently in Norwegian and Icelandic poetry of the 10th and 11th centuries, and the poets speak apprehensively of the day he will break loose. So, basically, he was feared. This is not like some of the others we've read about, that he was revered and worshipped, and he was had this
wolves feature prominently in Norse mythology. You've got the Fenris wolf, you've got Freke and Geri who are Odin's wolves. Then you've got Skoll and Hati. Skoll and Hati during the time of Ragnarok, one will eat the sun and the other will eat the moon.
So Norse mythology did not put them up on pedestals. They were afraid of these creatures, which is, if you look at what, that's generally what nowadays, when you think about a dogman or a werewolf or any of that kind of stuff, that's the general idea. There's not too many people that are like, oh, I want to worship a werewolf. They're like, Doc, what time is it? It's time to go.
It's time to go. I got something else to do. Yeah.
So
that's interesting.
But if you go back, and obviously there was a lot of liberties taken in the Marvel movies, but Fenrir was in some of the Marvel movies. They didn't actually portray him as like he was more of Hela's pet, but they did have the thing where he was chained up down in the Odin's trophy room, I guess, or below Odin's trophy room. He was very feared because when he was released, he pretty much wreaked havoc on everything that was left, or everybody that was left on Asgard. So all this kind of stuff does leak into modern culture, whether they take some liberties with it or not. It still leaks into it, and you've got little hints of the actual myth.
Yeah, I mean, but where the myths come from? We always talk about this, how they're based in. There's something there that it was had to be based in originally.
You've also got the Ulfhednar, the wolf berserkers of Norse mythology. Now, in some versions of the story, it is men who basically would chew certain herbs to drive them into a berserk frenzy and wore the trappings of a wolf. But others say they were wolves. They became wolves and fought, and no blade could pierce them. No blade could stop them.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the Ulfbert, that is the wolf sword.
Mm-hmm.
That's the sword of the king, is the wolf sword. I mean, wolves were very highly regarded in Norse mythology, but they were also very highly feared.
Right. They were, there was a reason for it. But if you look into just even the descriptions of the Ulfhednar, could they have actually been talking about using dogmen as shock troops?
Yeah. I mean, why not?
It makes sense. I mean, if you got a 6.5, 7 foot tall dogman, and these things are reported to have been shot multiple times by people that have seen them in the field, and they shrugged it off, what's a sword going to do? What's an arrow going to do? It's going to keep freaking coming.
See ya.
And that kind of if you look at some of the Germanic and some of the Old English versions of how you became a werewolf, a lot of them was putting a wolf pelt on, or
a belt made of wolf skin, drink from the paw print of a wolf,
or some kind of salve or something, or and a lot of that is, if you go back and look at the wolf soldiers from the Viking tradition, some of them had some of that stuff in there. So all that stuff permeates from somewhere, like we said, Doc. So I mean, it all, you can trace most all of these things back, but where did they get them from originally? There's got to be some kind of truth to something.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've got another historical reference that dates back to antiquity, and that's the cyanocephali. And I will jump into that because this is one I really dug into when I was researching for my books. Cyanocephali literally means having the head of a dog, but there's a reason for that. Both the Greeks and the Romans spoke of encountering dog-headed creatures that they referred to as cynocephalus, or would later become the cyanocephali. These were creatures that had it was a tribe of dog-headed men native to Africa and India. The name cynocephalus means dog-headed, from the Greek words, I can't pronounce that, meaning the words dog and head. I'm sorry, my Greek, forget it. It's Greek to me, literally. They said the legend probably originated in ancient travelers' accounts of African baboons that were mistaken to be tribes of men, which I disagree with, because no one's going to look at a baboon and think it's a dude. They're way too small. And the fact that the Romans talked of fighting these things, they wouldn't talk about fighting tribes of baboons. They would just use archers to put down what they would know to be an animal. These are warriors. They're depicted as wearing armor. They're depicted, as using weapons. That's not something a baboon would do. But these are both the Greeks and the Romans talk of encountering these tribes in Africa and India, and that to me that is just fantastic, because not only does it corroborate what we're seeing in Catholic iconography and in Greek Orthodox texts, we're seeing this as Roman legions and the warriors of Greece, including Alexander the Great, encountering and fighting these things. It's not something that would have gone into the report as just oh, by the way, we saw a dog man and nobody believed us. It's we fought these things. We engaged them in battle. There's a reason the term cyanocephali still exists today, because the Greeks and the Romans documented it. So literally it means having the head of a man, a man-like body having the head of a dog. Sorry about that. I'm an idiot. But but when you look at that, it fits so much. You see these pieces from disparate parts of the world starting to fit together. And these creatures have not just been seen, in Africa and India now. They've been seen all over the world, which if that's the case, it means they're smart enough to travel. That's a greater degree of intelligence than you would find from a baboon. These things were able to migrate to other continents. How did they do that? Well, up until the Botany Bay, Australia was only inhabited by the Aborigines. Now, when England started using it as a penal colony and dumping all their troublemakers there, how did that transfer over unless they were sending some of them as well?
Good point.
That is interesting.
And although I couldn't get him on for tonight because of the time lag, but Leon Howarth, who's been on the show, and we're going to have him back on pretty soon to get an update on all his research in England. He's been researching Dogman in England for a very long time, and they're still being seen in England today.
Is that the guy that goes out hunting them without even a yeah?
Yeah, and because they're not allowed to have firearms.
Yeah, nah, pass.
John Doe says dogmen are known to be accomplished swimmers. I've heard that as well. So now we've got the cyanocephali. We've got the Bible, Catholic iconography. We've got Greek and Roman, talking about the cyanocephali. We've got possible connections to Fenrir. We've got disparate places from all over the world, including China, that are talking about dog-headed soldiers. Then you run into the accounts of both Marco Polo and Christopher Columbus, who talked about seeing these dog-headed creatures on islands. So, how many of these puzzle pieces have to fall into place before people realize these things have been around for a very, very long time? And just how long? Well, there's my tinfoil hat theory. And again, this is theory. I think they evolved. I think they evolved from dire wolves. And I'll show you some of the images that over at the NADP we've had. Let's take a look. This would be a German Shepherd against a werewolf on all fours. That very closely matches the proportions of dire wolves. Look at this one. That's supposed to be a dog man, but it would also fit the proportions of a dire wolf. Then look at this one. We've got a coyote, a wolf, and dog man on all fours. Again, matching the proportions of a dire wolf. Then you see them on their hind legs. Beast of Bray Road, the Michigan dog man. Then a more traditional, the Beast of LBL. That's at 7 feet tall. That would be roughly the size of the one I saw. Although the one I saw didn't have a face quite like that. It looks more like this.
Yeah, more canid.
Yeah, but it wasn't that tall. The snout was kind of blunted like that, but it wasn't the what I would refer to as the very blunt faced. However, that'll give you a good example of what a 6-foot person next to a 10-foot tall dog man would be like. That also applies to Bigfoot, by the way, just how much bigger they are than us.
Nope.
Yeah, that's a nope sandwich right there.
Nope.
There's a reason these things keep appearing down through history, and we're going through that. We're getting closer to modern times. Which one of you guys would like to take the next one? The Beast of Gévaudan.
Doc, you go ahead. I just did Fenris.
Doc, I'll give you the link. I'm shooting the link over there.
The Beast of Gévaudan. All right, let's see here. It sounds French.
It is French.
French.
La Bestia de Gévaudan. So the Beast of Gévaudan, it's a historic man-eating animal or animals. It terrorized the former province of Gévaudan, consisting of the modern-day department of Lozère and part of Haute-Loire, as well as Auvergne and South Dordogne areas of France, wherever the heck that is. It's in the mountains of South Central from 1764, 1767. The attacks, which covered an area spanning 56 by 50 miles, so several hundred square miles, were said to have been committed by one or more beasts with formidable teeth and immense tails. That's according to contemporary eyewitnesses. Now, most of the period descriptions identify them as a striped hyena, wolf dog, or a wolf dog hybrid. The people typically were killed by having their throats torn out, which is a very canine type behavior. And the Kingdom of France actually was involved in this manhunt. Interestingly enough, they used actually a considerable amount of wealth and manpower to hunt these, to try to find these animals responsible. And they used people, nobles and soldiers, royal huntsmen, civilians. So they were finding a lot of folks, but the number of victims kind of varies depending on what you read. But there was actually a study done in 1987 that estimated there had been, get this now, 610 attacks, and out of that there were 500 deaths, 49 injuries. Out of those, 98 of the victims that were killed were partially eaten, and then it said that other sources claim that the animals killed between 60 and 100 adults and children and injured more than 30. So you get definitely varying numbers, and it was reported that it was killed several times before the attacks finally stopped. So if the beast was reported killed several times before it was finally stopped, that would definitely lend credence to the theory that there were more than one beast. So it could have been, hey, we killed it, and then there's still some more attacks, and all of a sudden, there's other attacks, and they killed that one. So they said it was about the size of a cow. It was a wolf.
That's way bigger than a wolf.
Yeah, and I'm like, that's pretty doggone big right there. Elongated head, flattened snout, pointed ears.
$1.50.
Yeah, and so it's supposed to be a big critter.
I don't know.
It's the size of a cow. It ain't no 150-pound wolf. If it's the size of a cow, this thing's probably pushing 700-800 pounds.
Exactly.
If I'm not mistaken, I think the Beast of Gévaudan is where Silver Kills Werewolf came into play. I think that's where, because one of the hunters claimed that because if I'm not mistaken, the king actually got involved in this. Actually sent a group of hunters.
They had royal huntsmen.
Yeah, because it got so bad that the king was like, "Hey, I got to do something. I got to get into this." And
they hired professional hunters.
I think
big hunters.
They had they thought that it was, somehow or another there was something that was said that it was a demon, or it was I don't know if they were using the term werewolf at that time or what, but somehow the church got involved when the king got involved, and there was bullets made of silver that were blessed by the clergy, and that's supposedly what eventually killed it. And I think that's where that part of the legend came from.
Kerway asked, what cryptid do you think can beat a Dogman besides maybe a Bigfoot? We talked about Bigfoot versus Dogman on a show just not too long ago. And again, depending on the cryptid, depending on the size, I think it will, just like we established with Bigfoot, it all comes down to first hit. Whoever gets that first nasty hit in. But I'd put my money on the Ozarks Howler versus a Dogman.
That's just a big nasty critter, though.
It is. Lene Perkins says, man, I can't imagine how totally freaked out I'd be to see a wolf the size of a cow. I would be like, well, it's time to move. Look at the time.
See you. Yeah. Adios.
Yeah.
I'm out of here.
Pack up the kids. We're going to England.
I'm calling in scared. Afraid I ain't gonna make it.
I'm ridiculously underprepared to deal with this thing.
Yeah.
That's when you get on the horn and go, Valkyrie, you've got your target.
Yeah. Yeah. I know it'd be the
Now,
Dogman.
Valkyrie. Anytime now.
Sometime
A
today.
Gal
Please.
7. A Gal 7 off of a A10 Warthog. That would probably do it. So,
Yeah.
just saying.
Couple passes by Puff the Magic Dragon.
Or an A10. Yeah.
We used to call that fart of the gods.
Fuck
So,
the gods.
was,
That's
yeah,
hilarious.
that was awesome.
But still yet we've got more mythology that talks about werewolves, but not all of them speak of them being evil. One in particular comes to mind, and since Doc is such a scholar in the terms when it comes to all things Scottish, even more so than I am. I thought I was pretty well versed, but Doc kind of blows me away. It's all the Scotch we've absorbed over the years that kind of imparts that knowledge. But there's a Scottish werewolf that is known to be helpful.
Yes, that's why I know so much about German, because I like beer.
Ich liebe beer. Yeah, so this one is called the wolver. That's WLVER. It's also not known as the kind-hearted werewolf of Shetland. So this was this article from the Scotsman magazine is actually talks about how this creature was not fitting with the stereotypical image of what we have, what Hollywood has portrayed it as. It was actually known as a hearted, generous soul, and it helped some of the more unfortunate people in the country. It comes from the Shetland Islands, which is north of the Scottish mainland. So if you go on the north coast of Scotland, the Shetland Islands are out here, and it is said that the wolver took the form of a man with a wolf's head. And basically, it would actually help the poorer families actually share the fish that it caught and leave the windowsills of their homes. And they said it was spotted on a regular basis. This is as late as the 20th century, y'all, which is actually kind of interesting. So I said it had brown hair, thick brown hair, unlike a werewolf. It says the wolver was never human in the first place, which is kind of interesting. And it said that the ancient Celts believed that the wolver actually evolved, which is kind of what you were saying, DA, evolved from wolves. And it was said to be symbolic of the in-between stage of man and wolf. And it said there's not a whole lot of, since there's not all, it's more of a myth, there's not a lot of official documentation. It said the last reported sighting being in the early 20th century. And it said it lived alone in a cave in Shetland and was very peaceful. And however, though, they said if it was provoked, that it could get violent, but for the most time, it would help the poor families. It said it also helped sick families. It said the wolver was seen sitting outside, basically kind of like outside the home of terminally ill people, and it was they actually had they had a rock on Shetland, on one of the Shetland Islands. They called it the Wolver's Stain, which is known as the Wolver Stone, and it would be spotted on this one particular rock fishing, and so it's pretty interesting. It's a lot of theories even vary to someone who suffers from hypertrichosis, which is basically like you see. Remember the stories of those the wolf boys from Mexico, that little family of wolf boys, and they were like in the circus as part of the freak show, sadly. But this is known as hypertrichosis, or someone who suffers from the psychological condition lycanthropy. Then the key word on that is lichen, which they believe they're a wolf. But it says, whether it was real or there's still a lot of superstitions even today in those isles in the Shetland Isles about the wolver. And hey, this was actually nothing bad. It was that's actually kind of a nice story on this thing, because it wasn't violent, but it was a kind of a benevolent creature. So
Well, if
interesting.
these creatures are intelligent, surely there are good and bad in them.
Oh yeah, we've talked about it even with the how
Mhm.
different tribes, whatever. I mean, there some may be more warlike and some are very peaceful. It makes total
Yeah.
sense.
Steve Patton says, "Look at all the
So
strange things normal predators do on occasion, being helpful to humans. Why couldn't a Dogman or Bigfoot do the same?" I totally agree.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Some may be violent, some may not be violent. But yeah, that's a pretty interesting account
Exactly.
because I mean the Dogman or werewolf, the Dogman, these creatures get cast in a negative. But this is something that's a pretty interesting story from the old country.
Absolutely. And I wanted to throw that one in just
Oh,
as a connection to the possibility that they're not all bad. Um, However, the bulk of modern Dogman sightings use the term either the term hellish or demonic. Most encounters are not what we would consider favorable accounts. People
correct.
were terrified and in many cases felt they were being hunted.
Well,
That's pretty interesting.
like going back to some of the Norse mythology versus Scottish mythology of I guess it depends on what you've seen and because a lot of Norse mythology is really dark and
Mm-hmm.
there's not a lot of feel good stuff to it. I
Well,
mean,
also you look at the Scottish legends and history. At one point, a good chunk of northern Scotland was in possession of the Vikings.
Yeah,
It wasn't
absolutely.
until Somerled MacDonald led the clans against them and drove them back out of the Isles.
Yeah, and there's something in here. This is on Wikipedia, which is kind of funny. You mentioned that too, Robbie. Is that it said there was some after researching folklore traditions in the Gaelic areas of Scotland, these writers looked and they were talking about how there's this guy named what's his name Saxby. Saxby was his last name, and he was talking. And Jacob Jacobson and John Spence mentioned a hill called Wolver's Hool in their writings and stated that was named after a fairy. But Saxby didn't understand that the word wolver was actually derived from an Old Norse word for fairy, and
I
it created
didn't
the
know
wolver as Shetland folklore. So, I mean, yeah, you look up if you go into northern Scotland, if you go up towards the Isle of Skye, Skye, that's
that. Mhm.
actually an Old Norse name. The town where my family's from, Dingwall, that's Old Norse for point of assembly or place of assembly. Like my family's castle, the keep and everything date back to 1166. I've been up in that thing, and it was Old Norse settlement. And so, like Ullapool, Thurso, which is the northernmost town in Scotland, all those are Old Norse. They said that hell, like 98% of the people in Scotland have Norse lineage DNA,
Mhm.
which
mhm.
because they lived there, they settled there. So, which is kind of
Yeah.
interesting.
They
More,
settled. They lived and settled in a lot of places.
yeah, they
Mhm.
did. Yeah, they
A lot
did.
of places people don't even think that they've made it to.
Yeah,
Now, this isn't necessarily Dogman related, but the first Norse settlement in the United States, what they referred to as what did they call it? Just completely slipping my mind. I'm an idiot. Sorry. Um, the first Norse colony founded by Leif Erikson was they believed basically ran off by Bigfoot. They talked about
Yep.
encountering what they referred to as the Skraelings. And for the Norse to refer to something as huge and hairy is a big deal because Native Americans weren't that big. They
right.
were not as tall as the Norse.
Yeah.
So that's definitely not Native Americans. When I first read the account and read the account of the Skraelings, I thought must be a Norse word for North American Native Americans. But when you start reading the depictions, they describe these things as being huge and covered in hair. That's not a Native American tribe
For
unless you want to
anything
talk about Sasquatch.
for anything to scare off the Vikings, that's
Yeah.
saying something.
Yeah.
Because you go back and look at Michael Crichton's book, Eaters of the Dead, and it even kind of mentioned it some in the movie. You know, when they're getting chased by the Tartars, which
Mhm.
was not nice people, let's put it that way, and weren't scared of anybody. And they run up to the edge of the river, and then Tartars come up there and they see that Viking longship. They're like,
Look at the time.
I'm
Time to go.
back that way.
Deuces.
Time to
I'm
go.
out.
So for
Yeah,
anything to
exactly.
scare the Vikings, that's saying something, because they weren't typically scared of any kind of battle. And I mean, so for them to be run off by something, that means
That's
something.
interesting.
Well,
That's very
the Norse influence extends far and wide. I mean, look how much modern day Russia was shaped by its Viking antecedents. It was Russia itself is named after a Viking tribe called the Rus.
Yep.
So Kerway asked me, "Hey Doc, do you have any personal experience? Personal experience in what, man? The Dogman? If that's the question, then no. I'd said earlier on the I think it's before you bumped in that I have not had any experience with these. It's just the DA had sent me that one on the wolver from Scotland, which is actually pretty interesting. I'd like to see one if I ever went out there. So that'd be kind of cool.
Well, I think we can get everybody out this direction. Go down to Joe Bald and that other campground that's
Yeah.
bulldozed off. I think we might see something.
Yeah, as long as it's at a distance, that's
We'll
my
make
thing.
sure we got scopes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as long as it's at a distance, I'm okay with that.
1980 CNH says they found Norse runes in South America. I'll go you one better. Have any of you ever heard of the Heavener runestone? Heavener. Heavener runestone. They carbon dated this runestone to be at the 8th century. That's roughly 600 years before Columbus discovered North America.
Yep.
And you'll never guess where Heavener is. It's just outside of a little town called Heavener, Oklahoma.
Yep.
And there are other runestones just as old that have been unearthed in Minnesota and Wisconsin.
Yeah.
So the Vikings were yelling "Boomer Sooner" way before anybody else was.
That's right. They were out there making cheese.
That's funny, Robbie. Yeah, that's pretty
right.
cool. And I'd go one further to say this too, DA. I wouldn't be surprised if along like every major waterway in the United States, like Mississippi River being one, I guarantee you, if the Mississippi River, ever went down enough, they would probably find all kinds of Viking artifacts.
Well, allegedly, they
I'm
found a partial remains of a Viking longship in the mud along the Mississippi River near Memphis.
That's right. I remember that. That's right. Yeah.
Well, that was the whole basis of the movie Pathfinder.
Right.
Was when
the Vikings got a lot farther than anybody
Yeah.
gave them credit.
Yeah. That's pretty cool, man.
Tony Harris says he's a native Okie. Well, Tony, if you're still down there, if you ever want to go down to the Heavener runestone, I'll probably go with you. David By says the Heavener runestone is on my list to go see. Mine too. I need to make that trip.
That'd be pretty cool.
I also read an article that somebody who was doing research on languages, like the roots of languages, were looking at some of the language of the Lakota, and William Nighthawk can back me up on this one. And they found certain words that were Norse in origin.
Well, ain't that cool?
Yeah, among the Lakota.
Well, dog my cats. That's kind of rad. Huh.
And I guarantee you they carried with them tales of the Ulfhednar, or possibly had some with them.
I would not be surprised. Yeah. That's really cool, man. Y'all enjoying this show? If you are, I want you to click on that like and subscribe. And if you hadn't done that, if you have, that's cool. Tell other folks about this show and hit like and subscribe as well. There's my plug.
That would be much appreciated.
Yeah.
And since we're going to take a quick minute and take a quick break, Doc, why don't you tell us a little bit about Dark Angel Medical?
Well,
I might disappear for a second because I need to get some coffee. I will be right back.
That's fine. Yeah. So, DA has referenced our kits and our products in his books for a number of years now. So what my primary job is to make the best trauma kits out there. And if you're whether you're on the road or on a boat or in a car or anywhere else or hunting cryptids, you need to carry some sort of med kit with you. And more importantly, need to know how to use that stuff. Robbie, DA, Anthony, everybody has one of our kits. And if you use one of these kits to save yourself or someone else's life, all you got to do is let me know, and we will replace those components that you used absolutely free of charge. It's called our Kit for Life Guarantee. And for the viewers of DA Ex Machina, we have a coupon code cryptid25, and that gives you 25% off all of our products, all of our kits on our website. So you go over to darkangelmedical.com and check out that cryptid25. And we have classes all over the United States. And next year, we're going to be doing classes all over the United States again, along with I'm happy to say it here because nobody's even heard about it yet. We're going to be launching a complete online course that is our 2-day course that you can take a month to take. And so it gives you a whole month to take the class. So get a kit and get trained and be that difference out there, because the difference you make may be in your life or somebody else's.
Thank you, Doc. And don't forget to use that Cryptid 25 discount code.
Absolutely. David, we use the fabric Band-Aids because they stick better. They're more expensive, but they stick better. They work more betterer.
I got back quicker because I decided instead of coffee, I wanted something a little more amber in color.
I'm about right there with you.
West Coast Dogman Project says Ulonga Dog Lala. The Ulonga Dog Lala is the Cherokee word for dogmen. They have a long history of sightings of these type of creatures. It means long dogs or I think, is that the one that means knife teeth?
Yeah, I think it was long dogs and knife teeth were both translations. Probably just depending on which area you were in, because I've heard both.
Yeah. Yeah, like Doc was saying, if you are enjoying the show tonight, make sure you hit that like and subscribe. We certainly appreciate it. Every like does help with us to get into the YouTube algorithm, to get the show out there further. And if you're enjoying this kind of content, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell icon, and share this content with your friends. Let people know what we're doing over here. We're hoping to continue to grow the channel. We've had some awesome growth in the last year. And I would like to see that continue. And I thank each and every one of you for that, because it is awesome. Now that we're still getting back into the origins of this, there are still more historical accounts. If you start looking, we're not just talking about the Dogman, but the origins of the werewolf legend. Could the werewolf be something separate? Could the werewolf actually be an explanation for why these dog-headed creatures exist? I'm not saying that the possibility of the werewolf doesn't happen, that there could be people who do turn into these wolf-like creatures, but it makes you wonder if it's not simply a primitive attempt to explain creatures like this. Like, for example, the Varkalak. Robbie, you wanna take the Varkalak?
Yeah, let me look it up, because I think Doc had that one, so I didn't have it, but I'll be glad to get it.
Sentinel's in the house. Hey, Robert. What's up, brother?
I are back. Brisket.
Doc, did you have the stuff pulled up on? I just completely forgot what I just mentioned to Robbie. The Varkalak. Did you have the Varkalak pulled up?
I do.
Okay. All right. Well, then we'll let Doc run with it, because he already had it pulled up.
Good, because I couldn't pull up anything with some kind of game thing.
All right, here we go. The Varkalak is a Romanian. It's a Romanian wolf demon, they also call it. And like the Norse Fenris or Fenrir, It says that the Varkalach may swallow the moon and sun is responsible for eclipses. So a lot of the legends say it's a ghost or vampire. It's Strigoi. And others say it's a werewolf. And in some versions, this is even weirder. The werewolf emerges from the corpses of babies. So it's a lot of things about the origin. Yeah, it says it comes from the souls of unbaptized children, children of unmarried parents. It's cursed by God, rising because one swept dust out on a house at sunset. Weird one. It's they're always typically they're typically described as dogs, and they're or some sort of wolf-like creature. In Romanian, Varkalach commonly means werewolf, but it can also mean goblin. And it's a loan from Bulgarian. It's Slavic in origin. The Bulgarian Varkalach, Vulkadlak, Greek Virkalakas. And it means werewolf. And so it's interesting. Also, there's another one that's a hybrid that you may have heard about in some of DA's books called the Prikolichi. It's a form of a Varkalach, and it's like a hybrid werewolf and vampire, which is pretty cool, man. But these werewolf legends, it started in it was actually started with ill-mannered humans metamorphose into werewolves. It's a common theme in Central and Eastern European rural areas. Italian Sicilians have their own similar belief in the werewolf, also what's called lycanthropy. And then the werewolf legends of Romania is a big thing. Like in stories to little kids. You better be good or that Varkalach is going to get you type of thing. Kind of like what stories I heard in the rural South close to Louisiana. We always talked about the Rougarou, and I think we're going to talk about that later on as well. But it's definitely it's a wolf-like creature. It can be depicted as a wolf, but unlike a wolf, which is on four legs, this is bipedal, which kind of furthers our theory of the Dogman. So it still doesn't like silver, doesn't like garlic. So there's a lot of similarities between that. The Romanian legends of and lore of the Count Dracula, Vlad Tepes, and the other stuff. But it's pretty interesting, man. How the werewolf lore in Romania depicts this animal as a dying person, but it also the weakness of it is sleep, and it'll send its spirit to the moon through its mouth, which is kind of interesting. So sleep.
It's weird how in Romanian the werewolf lore blends so much with vampire lore.
Yeah,
Big time. Of course, you've got the two types of vampires. You've got the moroi and the strigoi. One being a living vampire and the other being a undead vampire.
One's the one that hadn't died yet, and the ones who haven't died yet, from what I remember, they're the ones who are less violent. The morgoi, the dead undead are
the modern spin on that is the ones who haven't fed on humans yet would be more of those but the ones who have gone full circle and fed on humans and taken human lives, those would be the full undead.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting how there's a lot of blending of the werewolf and vampire lore.
And if you've read Dracula by Bram Stoker, there's a lot of werewolfism and werewolf hints in that movie. And
he even transformed to a wolf,
Yeah, and that was some of the things when Francis Ford Coppola did, which I know there was a lot of liberties he took in that, but he did take a lot of stuff from the book.
That one. Yeah, I would say that one's the closest adaptation of Stoker.
Yeah, but it was faithful enough to the book to where it kept, and that was one of the things that did keep him was the werewolf part where he turned into the werewolf towards the right after he got to England.
Yeah, because the whole big thing with the vampires, and this that was always, you see it now, it's more common, is that they're I know I'm kind of sidetracking, but I just want to, this is kind of cool point. The whole sunlight thing. Dracula he didn't die in sunlight in the original Bram Stoker's
Right.
Dracula. It made him weaker. It made him weaker, but he didn't die in sunlight. The whole sunlight thing didn't come out to, what was it, 1921? The German film Nosferatu.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's where that one came from.
That's where the whole sunlight thing killing did.
Hollywood has corrupted a lot of the lore. If you look back,
Yeah.
you don't find the werewolves being killed by silver bullets. That's a Hollywood
Right.
fabrication.
Yeah, that came in the Wolfman, I think,
Mhm.
when he healed it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't silver bullets; it was just silver, because remember
Right.
It was a silver
he killed him
cane.
with a silver-headed cane. Yeah,
Yep, absolutely. That was
And-
Lon Chaney, I believe.
yeah.
Mhm.
Lon Chaney was the played the Wolfman, or
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and then Claude Rains was his dad that killed him.
Mhm.
No relation.
And Olga Suspinskaya. She was the old gypsy woman.
Yep.
Just
Malina.
creepy as hell.
Because see, actually, that poem, they changed that poem. That
Even he
wasn't.
who is pure in heart and says his prayer by night.
Yeah, they added in the all the moon being full and bright. That part was actually added in. That wasn't in the original, because
Kiss
that's
my
another
foot.
Hollywood. That's
Huh.
another Hollywood thing that they only turn at the full moon.
Mhm. That's a classic werewolf can transform anytime. Now,
Interesting.
I would say it would become less controllable near the time of the full moon, because
And
even in the older legends, the moon figures prominently in the lore. But I would, the classic werewolf mythology, they can turn anytime.
and that's one of the reasons I like Silver Bullet so well, because
Yep.
he kind of he spun it back to where it needed to be when Uncle Red was out there and he said the moon wasn't even full, Marty. He's like, well, maybe he's like in the old movies they say that, but maybe he's just like that all the time. Only as the moon gets fuller, you lose more of your humanity and gain more of the bestiality part of it.
Beast. Yeah.
You become more, like he said. He said the guy becomes wolfier, but basically, you become more of a beast as the fuller the moon gets. But
Mhm.
you can turn anytime you want to. It's just
Right.
you lose control completely once the moon's
That makes-
full. It's just
that makes sense.
the lunar cycle.
And
Kirst had a good question. Go
yeah,
ahead.
that's a question for you, DA. Go ahead, man. No, you're the.
Oh, he says, for the layman or those of us who are new to the literature aspect, how do we get past the Hollywood junk into the original stuff? All I can say is just dig. I started digging into the old lore. I look, especially with the Wendigo, because there's just so much of it out there, and different tribes have different versions of the legend. It's the same thing with the werewolf. People that play areas that talk about the werewolf each have slightly different views on it. But if it's like a Dogman, I don't think silver's really going to hurt it. I think you're just making expensive bullets.
Yeah.
Well, and ballistically speaking, the silver is pretty hard, and it does not expand like lead does,
Mhm.
copper jacketed lead, and so it won't hit the lands on the barrel that the bullet spins down the rifling. So it's notoriously inaccurate as well.
Yeah.
If I was going to make a silver bullet, like in some of the lore for Wendigo, it says that silver through the heart can kill it, or at least slow it down. I would probably take an existing hollow point and drip silver nitrate into it, then cover it with wax.
Well, the whole thing with silver too, and the reason a lot of that silver came in because silver is supposed to be the only pure metal,
Sure. Yeah.
and it's the only metal that can be blessed. Therefore, going back to the Beast of Gévaudan, the silver was blessed, and even back then, the bullets they were making, it was your ball ammunition, so there wasn't any rifling in the barrel, so
Right.
it wasn't going to be accurate anyway. So
Right.
if you were going to make silver bullets back then, it would have been feasible. Nowadays, with rifling and stuff like that, it wouldn't be feasible to make a bullet out of silver anyway. But and you can trace some of that back to the 13 pieces of silver paid to Judas
Mhm.
to betray Jesus Christ.
Hmm.
That's why
The
they say
black
silver is
denarii.
pure. So I mean,
Excuse me.
you just it's like DA said, you research. I mean, have probably watched every single werewolf movie ever made. I mean, there's probably one
Some
or
are
two out
good,
there.
some not so good.
Yeah, exactly. And every one of them
My favorites
has,
are the one that stick closer to the lore.
yeah, and
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
every one
Like,
of
for
them
example, in
got a
American
different
Wolf in London,
spin
when
on
he was
something.
killed, he wasn't killed with silver bullets. He was killed by normal bullets.
I got something for y'all. You two are gun guys like I am. I don't know how this would work. I don't know if it's ever been tried or if it even worked. What if you did a silver cord bullet with a copper jacket? Like
Well,
you
if
do.
you've made a hollow point and it expanded, it would certainly punch it inside.
As long as
Yeah.
it would expand enough to catch the rifling, the lands.
Well, that's why I think DA's idea, that
Yeah.
one would work too. But DA's idea is about the besides that would be about the most feasible thing. Just put
Silver
some silver.
nitrate.
Think back to Jaws when he took those hollow points. He was putting the cyanide in the tips of the hollow points and covering them with wax. I mean,
Yeah.
That's actually where I got the idea. Steve Patton says, well, look how much more crazy things are during a full moon while being a first responder. You ain't joking.
Fact.
You ain't seen crazy until you've worked a midnight shift as a cop or an EMT.
Dude, I hated working in ER on a full moon night, working night shift on a full moon in the ER or on the ambulance when I was a paramedic too. Absolute pandemonium, dude. And like you said, that's where lunacy comes from and lunatics and everything else.
Based on the moon.
Yeah.
The moon does affect people. If you can work a shift in an ER and tell me that doesn't. Kirby says, do you think a lion or tiger could take on a Dogman? Maybe.
I think a full-grown male tiger probably would have a chance because you're looking at a 700-800 pound male tiger versus 400 or 500 pound male lion. I think a male tiger probably has a good shot. I've seen videos with tigers taking on 14-foot crocodiles and winning. So I mean,
Steve Padden had a good point. He says blunderbuss, but just sprinkle some silver shot into a shotgun.
There you go. Yeah.
And that's another thing too. Silver pellets in a shotgun.
We're just loaded with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Silver buckshot.
What about a dozen old pre-1970 dimes in that son of a gun?
Yeah. Hell yeah.
I don't care who you are. That's going to hurt.
Yeah. Yeah. Oof. That's pretty cool. All right, Dan.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm way behind on the comments. I let them scroll, and they're way behind on me. Tombstone says, "Yeah, working security, I always noticed the same thing. Full moon was always chaos." The full moon does affect people, so it's logical to assume they would affect dogmen or werewolves. It does. The word lunatic exists for a reason.
The moon affects more than just people, and I mean it affects tides. It affects animals. It affects. So people don't realize how much effect on this planet that little satellite orbiting us has.
And what is it? And think about this: if it affects tides, what are our bodies mostly made of?
Water.
Interessante.
Yeah.
It's true. So, you're looking at more modern times, especially here in America. We've got the beast of LBL, which before there was an LBL, it was the land between the rivers. Accounts in that area go back to French trappers who referred to it as the Loup Garou in the late 1600s. Then you've got the Michigan Dogman. You've got the Beast of Bray Road. There are the incident that happened in Palmyra, Maine. Even to this day, there are Dogman sightings coming in areas. Now, there's some debate about whether or not about the legitimacy of the story known as Siege of Lockett Ranch. Some people say it's true. Some people say it was made up. I don't know for sure, but I do know there are lots of animal attack stories coming out of the Taylor, Mississippi area. You can go on YouTube and look that up. Even in the last few years, there have been animal attacks and livestock being mutilated, horses, cattle, large animals being mauled to death by a large predator. And I know mountain lions are capable of bringing down a lot of things, but a mountain lion bringing down a horse would be a hell of a feat because that is a big animal. You're talking a 200-pound animal versus a 1,100-pound animal.
Yeah.
In fact, there was one case here in Missouri. where a limousine bull that weighed 1,400 pounds was mauled to death.
It takes something to maul a bull, because
That's a
there's
mean
not-
animal to begin with.
yeah, I'm about
And
to
this
say
bull
there's
was
not
known
much
to
a
be
bull's going to back down
cantankerous.
from.
Yeah.
I mean,
We had a 1,800-pound Brangus, and that sucker hated me, and I was terrified of him. But he was scared of our horses. He didn't like our horses. It kicked the snot out of him.
Yeah, I've seen a horse send a dog rolling.
Oh yeah,
Dog get a little too close to its heels and poof. They're very accurate with those hind hooves.
yeah.
John
Well, I
Doe
mean-
said something. He said miniature donkeys routinely kill cougars because
That's
yeah,
why
that's
people
why
put
I was
llamas
just
in
about
with
to
their
say
stock.
most farmers, most people who have smaller livestock will put donkeys in there because they will kill coyotes.
yeah,
When I was,
I
in
have seen that
kindergarten kindergarten or first grade, we lived in New Mexico at the time, and I remember there was a kid in my class that, of course, they break it to kids super gently that somebody had died, but the kid was my age and he lived on a ranch, and he got a little too close to a horse that wasn't broke, and it kicked him in the middle of the chest and stopped his heart, killed him. He was about 6. And he had a perfect imprint of the horseshoe in the middle of his chest.
that's what we call a precordial thump.
Mm-hmm. Horse kicked him. Kid went flying, dead on impact.
Yep, stopped his heart. That's interesting.
Horses
Yeah,
ain't
that's-
nothing to play around with. If you don't know what you're doing around a horse,
Mhm.
you're gonna get hurt quick.
I wonder if a donkey and a dog man would tie up.
Well, I would say my money would still be on the dog man, especially if there's more than one. But that donkey's going to get a piece of him.
Yeah,
Oh.
that dog man know he got a hold of something if he got a hold of a donkey. That's for sure.
Like when I was working as a corrections officer, I had a guy who was twice my size. He was about 6'8" and weighed about 400 pounds. And he looked at me and he said, I told him to go to his cell. And he looked at me and goes, "Son, I will beat your ass." And I said, "Well, maybe, but I promise you when you're done, those long, cold nights in your cell, you're going to remember my name." And
Yeah.
he looked at me and he goes, "There's just enough crazy in your eyes. You'll do it, won't you?" I'm like, "Yes, I will." Every time your knee creaks when you're an old man, you'll remember my name.
That's right.
I may not be able to reach the top, but I can tear up the bottom.
Yeah, when you reach the age that we're at, there ain't no more fighting fair. You come at me, I'm gonna hyperextend your knee.
When my dad was still alive, when I was about 16, I decided I was big enough to take the old man down, and I went after him, and it was all in fun. I mean, it wasn't me trying to be ornery or trying to hurt him. And I remember going at him, and the next thing I remember, I was flat on my back in the middle of the yard. He'd thrown me off the porch, and he looked at me and he said something that I have been waiting to use on my sons, but they've never tried it. He looked at me and he said, "Son, old age and treachery will outdo youth and enthusiasm any day of the week."
Absolutely, man. Yeah, Angie's Angie's little. She's 5'1" and about a popcorn fart in size, but she's tiger meat and piano wire, and she's like, "Look," she said, "I might be little, but they're gonna earn it." She said, "I'll talk shit to the bitter end." So, and I don't doubt it.
71 Vega Man says, "Do we think Dogman is a flesh and blood creature or a paranormal entity or something else?" From the fact that it's been seen by so many cultures across the planet, it's got to be some sort of flesh and blood creature. That's not to say it couldn't have other origins, be that Nephilim, be that demonic, be that evolved from dire wolves, as I postulated. But I do believe very much that they're flesh and blood creatures. However, nobody really knows what their exact origin is. But what we're trying to do is just present just how far back information on these creatures go. We got too many naysayers, like the guy I kicked out of my North American Dogman group, that will pop in and start talking shit, saying, "Oh, there's no evidence that says these creatures exist." Well, the same logic can be said for Bigfoot. People, we've got tons and tons of anecdotal evidence. People have collected scat. They've had DNA analyzed. Dr. Melba Ketchum is in the middle of another study using different sources. DNA has been studied. Tracks have been identified, and Dr. Jeff Meldrum has shown how this track morphology can't be faked unless you've got a PhD in primate foot morphology. There's no way you could have faked that. And I'm pretty sure guys with PhDs in primate anatomy aren't running around the deep woods planting these tracks in the hope that somebody finds them.
I like what Grover Krantz said about that. I think he's dead now, but he was kind of the forerunner before Jeff Meldrum was on footprints and locomotion and all that kind of stuff. And he pretty much said it this way. He goes, or the guy was working a documentary said, well, what would somebody have to do to be able to fool you? He said, well, quite frankly, they'd have to be smarter than me, and I don't believe that's going to be possible.
That's a good point. He was a very smart man.
Good. I got you there, Doc.
Legends and Lore had a good one. It says, heard an interesting theory earlier that they were government created to hunt down Bigfoot. I don't think the government created him. I think the government may have experimented on them or tried to use methods to control them, but I don't think the government created him, especially when you start looking at sightings that date back way before our government had the genetic technology to do anything like that.
Well,
I mean, some of these cases are pretty damn old.
Like that truck driver that we had on the show that had
Joe
shot one, and he was met with some government folk,
Yeah, I very firmly believe the government knows about these creatures and known about them for a very long time. But I also think that given the opportunity, our government will attempt to weaponize anything.
Yeah.
And we know from stories of like the giants of Kandahar and what Doc was talking about, the guy that was had seen them on FLIR outside of Fobs in Afghanistan. These things exist around the world, and it's not just here. It's reasonable to assume when we start looking at things like the Soviet experiment to try to breed super soldiers by trying to breed human women with both gorillas and chimpanzees. It didn't work. But I think given the right, because they canceled the project because it wasn't yielding fast enough results. But I think had they given that project time, they might have been able to do it because they were close. They were doing some really crazy shit. And that is just the Russians experimenting with known animals. If these creatures are out there, and I know they are. Well, there are many of us that are here in this, not only on the panel here, but in the chat tonight, who know these creatures are real because we've seen them. You can't tell us they don't exist because we've seen them. We know these creatures exist, and we know our government is notorious for doing a lot of shady, shadowy shit. I say that 5 times fast. But if they've known about these creatures for as long as we believe, it is not outside the realm of possibility that they tried to weaponize them.
Look at it, and DNA, you and I have the same. If Occam's razor, if they'll cover up stupid stuff like emails, they're going to cover up stuff like these creatures.
Oh yeah. Well, why else would the government try to quietly change the hunting laws to include near human chimeras protected? Why would they do that? And that was introduced on the floor of Congress. What the hell is a near human chimera? Doc, what's a chimera?
An amalgam.
Yeah, it's a blending of 2 species. Medically, it's something that exhibits 2 different characteristics, sometimes animalistic. There are cases where twins who while still in vitro would combine. One of them would die and be absorbed into the other one. One twin would exhibit both the DNA of both twins. That's a chimera. But that's not what they were talking about in the hunting laws. We're not going to hunt people, but it's very likely they're trying to protect something that's almost human.
Yeah, I'm still just kind of grossed out about the whole Russian thing, trying to breed human women with.
Well, they weren't giving the chimp Viagra and putting it in with a lady of ill repute. They were trying in vitro, but getting the chimp drunk and hooking him up with a sleazy Olga.
Go get her, Coco.
Sorry,
that's nasty. That's nasty. I don't even want that in my head. Thanks, DA. I appreciate
You're
that.
welcome. Hey, I'm a writer. Crap like that goes through my head all the time. You should see the inside of my brain. It'd give you nightmares. Pink Dahlia says that's nuts. They discussed chimeras on the floor. Yes, they did.
That's terrifying. That's terrifying. Yeah, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
If we as the public knew what was really going on, it just
I have done that, brother. Used to do that on patrol. Yeah, I mean, if we knew what was going on, Robbie, I'd be wrapping myself in Kevlar and bubble wrap. You know what I mean? It's just terrifying.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yep. But the thing is, and we've talked about this before, we'll hit certain nerves on things and
Mm-hmm.
video, damn satellites, stuff like that.
Yeah.
I don't believe in coincidences on stuff like that. I mean, everything happens for a reason, and everything that we talk about, and miraculously something gets redacted or something gets blurred out, or the Men in Black show up, or whatever you want to call, or whatever you want to say happens. Things are being monitored, and people know how close certain people and certain groups and individuals are getting.
And if they introduce this on the floor of a legislative body, then that should lend credence to the fact that it is a known fact, and that it does indeed exist. You know what I mean? I mean, it would be not, you would have to be willfully ignorant, aka known as stupid, not to believe otherwise. So it's scary. It's really scary.
Well, it's like we talked about. Me, you, and William was talking about that. I think it was last night with DA. He was talking about, you can hide a lot of crap in 1 million acres of land.
Right.
Absolutely.
And the modern evidence for the existence of these creatures is right at your fingertips. All you've got to do is a few brief Google searches to the average person who's willing to accept, things that are different. I mean, some people are so closed mind. You could walk one up and they'd go, "Hey, nice suit." But some people will never believe. And unfortunately, that's just the way it is. Some people are just so hard-headed that no amount of truth will ever open their eyes. However, when I started talking about the Bauman incident, and I know this is my own personal tinfoil hat theory, but I know a lot of people that agree with me. I've talked about this quite a bit. How Teddy Roosevelt wrote in his book, The Wilderness Hunter, the encounter with Bauman and the Bigfoot. Bauman, the Bauman story is classic. It's one of the first known recorded cases of somebody being killed by a Bigfoot. Due to the level of detail in it and the articulation of it, you don't get that level. I know my family's all hillbillies. You don't get that level of detail out of people. And they tell you a story, they really gloss over a lot of stuff. Like, oh, it was over at Henderson's farm, and then they just expect you to be able to fill all that in. But but the level of detail in the Bauman incident leads me to believe that he was there. And Teddy Roosevelt had political aspirations, so he didn't want to go on record and say he'd had his partner killed by a hairy monster that's not supposed to exist.
And then you were in law enforcement as long as I've been DA. 25 and a half years of pulling statements out of people. You are 100% correct. You don't get that. I mean, you have to pretty much, okay.
And what else? What did he look
else?
Like?
You didn't just go here and then that happened. What else happened? Give me the details from here to here. I mean, you have to drag it out of people. There's no way you get that level of detail if you just talking to somebody.
And I'm sure Robbie will agree on this. If you go to a burglary call or a robbery call and there's 5 witnesses, you're going to get 5 different stories. There'll be similarities in the stories, but every one of them will say, "Oh, he was 5 foot tall." The next guy was like, "Oh, he was 6'2". He was wearing a purple shirt. No, he was wearing a pink shirt.
Look, I'll tell people there's always 3 sides to every story. They look at me kind of funny. 3 sides. I'm like, yeah, there's your side, there's their side, and somewhere in the middle, there's the truth.
Yep.
That doesn't necessarily mean that you're lying or you're lying. It's just your perception of it is this. Your perception of it is this, and somewhere in the middle is the truth of those two perceptions.
Very much so.
Yeah, amen to
Now,
that.
you got Teddy Roosevelt, who had political aspirations, and if indeed he was Bauman, like I think he was, I think he very much knew about these creatures, because one of the first things he did as president was create the National Park Service, cordoning off millions of acres of habitat where we're still not allowed to hunt some of it, or most of it to this day. You're not allowed to carry firearms in most of these national parks. Another thing about that is when you overlay the missing 411 cases of the number of people that have gone missing and go largely unreported by the Park Service in these national parks, and we're not talking about people that wandered off the trail and broke an ankle and died. We're talking about people that disappeared under mysterious circumstances, like armed hunters who have hunted an area their entire life, vanishing without a trace while they were armed in an area they knew extremely well.
Yep.
John Doe says Roosevelt actively funded expeditions to find cryptids. Makes you wonder how many times they actually succeeded and it just didn't make the general public.
Right. Right.
Yeah, Tony Harris says Teddy Roosevelt got shot and finished his speech. Yeah, he was a tough dude.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he mocked the dude that shot him too, which is even baller as hell. I mean, that's gangster right there. So, and like you said, DA, these hunters disappear, armed hunters, they're armed obviously, and they disappear. I mean, they're with nothing, no clothes, no packs, no firearms. I mean, they're gone like a fart in the wind. I mean, they are out of here. And there was this one encounter or one story of a elderly gentleman, and he was out hunting with his son and a bunch of other dudes, and they were all in within calling distance of him, and he was gone. I mean, he was sitting on a rock or in a stand or something, and they never saw hide nor hair of him anywhere. Mm-hmm. Interesting stuff.
Very much so. But, and folks, we've only scratched the surface. I mean, we've got so many Dogman encounter stories from here in the United States. I know if we'd have been able to get Leon on, there's tons of them from England, more so than people would realize. We've got a couple of guys who I talk to frequently that are tombstones in the chat tonight that are from Australia, and they've got stories of Dogman there. John Doe, no, it wasn't John Doe. I can't remember who it was that pointed out that dog-headed men appeared in Chinese iconography as early as 660 BC. Then you've got the Catholic tie-ins. You've got the Romans and the Greeks fighting these things. It's just laid out. I mean, it's there for everybody to look at. You can Google any of this yourself. We're not just pulling this out of our ass and blowing smoke. It's there. From ancient Egypt to the Norse to the Chinese to all parts of the globe. The Romans and the Greeks said they were tribes from India and Africa. And the excuse that they were baboons, there aren't even baboons in India. They're native to Africa. So if it was a bunch of baboons, what were they doing in India? There are stories out of India today of people still seeing dog-headed men in the high mountains. This is not something new. Just because you haven't heard the phrase Dogman, Dogman's only been recently coined, the term. I believe it was actually coined by Linda Godfrey when she started digging into the Beast of Bray Road. But long before anybody ever heard the term Dogman, you had Native Americans like the Olunga Doglala, which I've talked about a great deal in my books. You've got the werewolf mythology. You've got King Lycian. You've got the cyanocephali. Are they intertwined? Are werewolves actually just these dogmen creatures? Or are werewolves something separate? We don't know. However, the tracks are there for everybody to explore. It's all there.
Yeah, and every culture, You know, I mean, look at the Native American culture. Every one of these tribes, they all had their own different name for them. You know, before
Mhm.
you know Bigfoot was coined by us. You know,
Yeah, Bigfoot was coined, I believe, in 1957 by the crew
Yeah.
of that logging camp that kept having their
No,
vehicles messed with.
the reporter that wrote the story about that is the one that
Yeah.
actually started that. He
Yeah.
said Bigfoot terrorizes logging camp, and that caught like wildfire. But
Yeah,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah,
I think when he printed out, it was Bigfoot, 2 words,
yeah.
and it
But if
caught
you-
on and became
You
Bigfoot.
want to talk about just a known species
Mhm.
that is one species, but is something totally different. What's one of the most dangerous sharks that we have here in America that can go in fresh water? What do we call it?
The what is it, the bull shark?
Bull shark. They don't call it the bull shark in Africa. They call it the Zambezi shark. Same shark, but it's
Yeah.
called a Zambezi.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that right there, a known species that we know exists, that we've caught specimens of it. It's the exact same specimen or exact same species here in America as they pulled out of rivers in Africa, but they call it a Zambezi shark down there. Different cultures have different names for the same thing.
Right.
So that proves that theory right there.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Whew.
And I think
Well,
it's actually got in India. I think they even have a different name for it other than
Mhm.
bull shark or Zambezi. So it's probably got 3 different names.
Right. And when you look at these, we're talking about not just Dogman but Bigfoot. Before the term Bigfoot was coined, we had Sasquatch, which was actually a an English derivative of an older Salish word. I think it was Sasquattle. I think it was.
Yeah,
Somebody
something
could
like
probably fact check me on that, but there was an older word that Sasquatch was coined from. Then you've got every tribe in the face of North America has got their own name for them. From the
Well-
Lakota call them Shiatanka.
Mhm.
And then you've got different interpretations. I mean,
Well-
every tribe has a name for these creatures,
and Yowie, Yaren,
yeah.
it-
They're, the Barmanu, they're known all over the world. They're describing creatures with very similar features. Yeti, Urin, Almasti, the Alma.
mhm.
The list goes on. I mean, I've got a
Even-
huge list of them. I
even
can
look
name
at
off a crap load of them.
look at just here in the United States, Grassman, Skunk Ape,
Momo the monster,
Momo the
the
monster,
wood ape.
Wood Ape. I mean, Honey Island Monster. I mean, or Honey Island Monster.
Well,
Honey
it
Island
makes
Beast.
Sabe. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can't sit here and say that every one of these people that have seen in all these little, like we've said, there's just too much, especially for people like the 3 of us who are evidence based and evidentiary. You go
Mhm.
where the evidence takes you, and there's just, even if I was a skeptical person and didn't believe in it, I'm the kind of person that looks at, okay, there's something. Just because of all the sheer number of people who have seen,
Right.
you can't write something like that off.
Right. And again, something that Robbie and I both know well, when we testify, we're told to use terms like based upon the preponderance of evidence. Defense attorneys freaking hate that because it lays out the fact that you've got all of this evidence. It's not just, one guy saw this guy. I've got 25 eyewitnesses. I've got his DNA at the scene. I've got, we have sent men to prison for life on less evidence than we have for the case of Bigfoot and Dogman.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
100%.
Curry says, whatever happened to Mountain Monsters, that TV show? Yeah, I think it got canceled. I don't know. It was pretty cheesy.
That was just cheap entertainment.
Mitch Habert says, didn't the ancient Egyptian gods have cat-headed gods as well? Yeah, Bastet, whichever you want to refer to it as. But yeah, they had even a crocodile-headed one. I can't remember what it was called. But they had a lot of different gods with heads of animals.
Wasn't that Set?
No, I don't think it was Set. I think Set
I gotta
had
look that up.
I can't remember, but I know one of them had the head of a crocodile. Sorry, I got sidetracked. I was looking at some of the comments. John Doe says Mountain Monsters was fun.
So bad.
If you took it for what it was never intended to be anything but entertainment.
Yes, that's true. Sobek was the crocodile-headed god.
Okay.
I knew it was with an S, but I was just off.
Ooh. Mercy.
Hell, I thought we might run long, but I think we're actually getting to a good wrap up point because we've gone down the rabbit hole. We've laid out historical cases. Before we do go though, that's one thing I haven't asked you guys. I know I voiced my pet theories. What's yours? What do you guys think? What do you think the origin is?
Go ahead, Doc.
Thanks, Robbie.
Under the bus, both wheels.
I don't know, man. There's so many, and we've talked about this tonight. There's so many different possibilities of what it is. I mean, and I think I can't remember who it was, but said, look, here's the thing: if it can disappear into an ethereal mist, or into a portal, I think that's supernatural. But flesh and blood, I mean, if it bleeds, it can die. But I think there is, God. I mean, if you look Native American pathway, it is, it's very spiritual. Not paranormal, but spiritual. Maybe a cursed soul or something like that. But from a scientific standpoint, I'm thinking more along the lines of something evolutionary. And the fact that it is that the dogmen that we talk about in your books, and we talk about on the show, and the evidence people have seen with it being a bipedal type creature, with the lower body, it still has a lower body, or from the waist down like a dog, but upper muscular upper body like a man. I mean, I think that's more of an evolutionary. It seems like it's more of an evolutionary thing to me. So that's my 2 cents. Take it for what it is, because I like y'all agree there's no experts in this, but that's just my theory. I think it's more evolutionary. What do you think, Robbie?
Okay, I agree with that assessment as far as Dogman goes. I think traditional Dogman is a flesh and blood creature. I believe it just like Bigfoot. I don't think that in itself is anything paranormal. I think it's just a creature that's out there.
Mm-hmm.
But I also believe there are werewolves, which are not
Okay.
Dogman. I believe that whether they're possessed by the devil, they made a deal with the devil, whatever the case may be.
Right.
There are evil people out there who want to do evil things, and I believe that there are vampires. There are people who drink blood. Some of them may not be the traditional Bram Stoker type vampires, but I believe there's some of those out there too. I believe that it's like we were talking about a movie one time about all this technology that was in a movie. Doc, you and I think have even talked about this. Most of this fanciful technology you see in all these movies, it's already there. There's already something like
Absolutely.
that.
Absolutely.
So taking that point of reasoning, when you see all these things in these movies, you see them for a reason. DA, you write the things you write for a reason, because you've seen things, you've heard things that people talked about, and there's some basis of truth in it. So I believe firmly that there are things out there that maybe it doesn't look like, what Everett McGill turned into in Silver Bullet, an 8 foot tall, maybe it doesn't look like that. But I believe there are creatures out there that what we would describe as a werewolf that because there's so many unidentifiable animal attacks or unknown animal attacks and on people and on cattle and on other things that, just like we said earlier, what in the world is going to do that to a 1,800-pound bull?
Right.
Other than something like, could a Gugway do it? Yeah, probably. But could a regular Dogman attack an 1,800-pound bull? Who knows?
It would take something very powerful to do it.
But could something that was not something that was possessed or something that was pure evil do something like that? Probably.
Yeah.
I just, I know that's my tinfoil hat theory. I know there's people will think I'm crazy for believing that there are things like that out there. But if you believe in demons and believe there are demons out there, how far of a stretch is it to believe that there's a werewolf out there somewhere?
No,
Very true.
That's
even if you just look at it as the legends. Legends are based on something.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
sorry,
a fair
Doc.
point. No,
I want to say big thanks to Billy Dank and Jeff Townsend for the super chats. You guys are awesome. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
thanks.
I mean, that's a fair point, Robbie. I mean, you bring up a good point. Because I was talking about evolutionary thing. You're talking about, well, hey, the other side of that coin is, what if it's somebody who did sell their soul, make a deal, whatever, or they're just an evil person? And I think that's a spirituality thing that comes in, like we were talking about with the Lakota. It could have been, because that's there's a cursed human. You know what I mean?
You don't have to look any further than people like John Wayne Gacy or Jeffrey Dahmer.
Absolutely.
To know there are evil people out there who would do anything in their power to destroy life.
Yeah. If there's light, there's dark. 100%.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And like I said, if you believe that there are demonic spirits out there, which how can you say it? That's just like we talk about, I've never seen a Dogman, but I believe they're out there. So, but if I believe in Bigfoot and I looked at DA and said, "Oh, you're crazy because he saw a Dogman," how hypocritical would that be?
Right.
Because I've seen a Bigfoot,
Absolutely.
I hadn't seen a Dogman. So Bigfoot exists, but Dogman don't exist. So by the same token, how can we say Bigfoot and Dogman and all that stuff exists and ghosts and demons and things like that, and not say something like a vampire or a werewolf exists? It's got to be in that realm of possibility. And
there's a show in the future on vampires alone. Yeah, Steve Padden says the Big H from Germany in 1944.
That pulls into everything. He was after every spiritual artifact you could, and that was kind of a
they had a unit called the werewolves.
Yeah, but that was kind of a joke in that Indiana Jones movie. But that was real. He was going after. He was trying to find the Spear of Destiny. He was trying to find the Holy Grail. He was trying to find because at that point he was getting his tail kicked, and he was trying to find any and every means that he could find to win that war. So it didn't matter how. And they kind of in the first Avengers movie when they were looking for the Tesseract, that was the whole Hydra thing. That was based on some of those real groups that he had.
The Honor Nerba.
Big into the occult. They were big into the occult.
Oh yeah, sure. Very big.
Yeah, all you got to do is research the Honor Nerba to see just how occulty they got. There's rumors that there are still sects of the Honor Nerba out there, but that's another show. I can tell you, at working as a cop, you see evil. You can see it. Sometimes you meet a person and you can just feel it coming off of them, especially in cases where they've done things to children that I won't mention.
No,
child crimes. That's the worst form of evil I can find. But I have stared evil in the face. I've talked to a guy who was classified by the U.S. Marshal Service as a serial killer. Had conversations with the guy that would probably terrify most people. I've talked to people that have multiple murders and looked them in the eye. They say I read a statistic sometime that they said the average person in their lifetime will walk within proximity of at least 3 murderers. Yeah, that might be true for normal folks, but people that have worked behind the walls as a correction officer, it's a far higher number. I've been in among them. It was direct supervision. We walked out through the middle of the inmates, and a lot of times we were short staffed, and I was in a pod by myself, outnumbered 130 to 1. And you've got to be able to stand your ground in situations like that because you are dealing with evil. Not in all cases. Some of them are just people that screwed up and are looking to get their life back in order, but there's a percentage that are just pure evil. Miriam, thank you so much for the super chat. That is awesome. So much. Thank you so much. As a cop, I will always come down on the side of physical evidence. That's just how I'm trained. That's just how I you go in the woods, you don't look up in the trees for a deer. Deer don't climb trees. I know that's just kind of a weird alliteration there, but you look for where the evidence is. If you're looking for a deer, you're not looking in the treetops. I'm not saying that these creatures don't have ties to possibly the Nephilim or demonic or something. I'm not saying that they don't go through portals. I'm not saying any of that because we don't know. What we're working on here, folks, is theory, and that's all any of us are going to have. But because of my background, I'm always going to fall back to physical evidence and Occam's razor. I always believe that the simplest explanation is likely the truth. Just because something disappeared in the woods doesn't mean it's mystical or it went through a portal. I'm not saying it can't. We know portals. Portals exist. CERN opened one. We know portals do exist. I'm not saying that cryptids couldn't go through them, but I've got a good buddy who was an Army Ranger, and that guy vanished in the woods, and I couldn't find him. And there ain't a magical bone in that dude's body. He's just creepy good. Guys, Doc knows people like that. Robbie knows people like that. Robbie's a tracker, and there are people that can just disappear. They will not leave a sign.
Yep.
And when we start talking about the missing 411 cases, when trackers are called in, the ones that I find the absolute most compelling are the ones where dogs refuse to track. Just lay down on nope, or they want to go back to the vehicle. Because I've worked with tracking dogs. I was never a dog handler. Robbie was. But I was never a dog handler, but I've worked with a lot of them. And when one of those dogs will not track, something is wrong. Those dogs live for the track. They cannot wait to get out of the truck and track somebody. They live for it. Especially Belgian Malinois. Those Belgian Malinois, we call them alligators. I mean, those dogs, they're one-track mind, laser focused, ready to eat the ass out of whatever they catch, and they'll do it. But I'm not saying, and I will never say, it's impossible that these creatures can't cloak, or it's impossible that they go through portals. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying follow the evidence, because if they are flesh and blood creatures and they're adapted to the woods, they are far better at it than we are, and than we ever hoped to be. And just because they stepped into the woods and disappeared doesn't mean they turned on their predator cloak. It means they're just damn good at disappearing.
Yep.
Because I know my buddy, and Mike, if he's out there listening, he probably isn't. He's not into this kind of stuff, but I can tell you for a fact that son of a gun can disappear in the woods, and you're not going to find him.
Well, you even said it when we were showing the video of our investigation, that when Taylor panned the camera over me, right at first you said you didn't even see me. Then you're like, oh yeah, there he is, and I wasn't even trying to be.
Mm-hmm.
I was just standing there.
Yeah, if you don't move, a lot of times the human eye will track right over you.
Yeah.
So, I'm not saying our vision is based on movement like T-Rex from Jurassic Park. I'm just saying that as a hunter in a deer stand, the only thing that ever gave a deer away was movement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They are damned hard to see when they ain't moving.
Yeah, Doc?
Yeah, man.
Getting pretty sleepy there, Doc?
It's just been a long couple of days, y'all. That's all.
Well, we're coming up on 2 hours and 20 minutes. We'll start wrapping this things up. It's a Ozarks goodbye. I start to say goodbye and I get off on a tangent and talk for another 20 minutes. My God, as a kid, my mother would do that. We'd go to visit relatives, and she'd go, "Okay, boys, get your coats. It's time to go." And we all get bundled up and get ready to go if it was cold outside. And she'd stop at the door and talk for 15 minutes. Then we'd
Yep.
go out on the porch and talk for another 20. Then we'd make it to the car and she'd turn around and talk for another 10 minutes. And then she might get in the car and roll her window down and talk for another 5 or 10 minutes before we'd leave. So get your coat and get ready to leave might be
Lord have
another
mercy.
hour.
My mom's same way. I try. All right, Mom, gotta go. Well, did you hear about? All right, Mom, I gotta go.
Yep. Yep. My family was the same way. Same exact way.
So, folks, if anybody anywhere tells you they're an expert in this field, they're either selling you something or they're just absolutely full of shit. Pardon my French. There are no experts in this field. I make no claims of being an expert, and I've been digging into this subject for a very long time. You know, there are people who know these things exist because they've seen them, and there are people that think they exist because they believe the preponderance of the evidence. And then there are people that no amount of evidence will ever convince.
That's right.
I'm one of the people that has had a direct experience, and I know they exist. Nothing anybody says is ever going to sway me and say, "Oh, you were just seeing something," because I'm going to call bullshit on that play. Big shout out tonight to everybody that gave us the super chats. You guys are awesome. Also want to thank the mods because you guys did a hell of a job. Moderators keep the chat flowing. The moderators have a hard job. Thanks to them, you know, they make this look good, which is a dull day job in and of itself. They keep the chat flowing. They post the links like Pink Dahlia is doing right now for Dark Angel Medical. Make sure you show them some love. And you can find them on Facebook or at darkangelmedical.com. If you're going to order a kit, use the Cryptid 25 code for 25% off your order.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah! I gotta support my brother.
I appreciate y'all, man, very much.
And folks, we are going to continue to do shows like this. We are going to do the deep dive research. I've been digging for days, looking for things I could use. I've talked about the cyanocephali before, but I didn't get into the fact that they were tribes. There were tribes in India and Africa that both the Greeks and the Romans encountered. And when you start digging deeper into the lore, you find out more references. And we didn't even put all of them on display. There are a lot more out there.
And I was one of those beforehand. I don't think people we don't just come in here and just sit down and start talking. I mean, there's a lot of research and things that goes into us putting these shows on, and that's why we hope y'all enjoy these shows, because we put a lot of effort into so there's not a lot of
Billy Dink says he wants to do some research in the Mark Twain National Forest. Well, shoot me an email and I'll give you some places that I would recommend. The Mark Twain is got a lot of weird shit in it. But also remember, and I've said this many times, and I'm going to go through my spiel again. I know I'm redundant. You look under redundant, you see a picture of me going. But if you're going to go out there, if you're going to go camping, hunting, fishing, hiking, backpacking, cryptid hunting, perhaps, be careful. Make a plan. Let somebody know where you're going. Somebody that's not going with you. Let them know where you're going, exactly where you're going, and let them know when you're supposed to be back. That way, if you don't come back, you've got someone that can start the process of getting somebody out there looking for you. Because there are things out in these woods, not just the woods of Missouri, but the woods all over the world, especially in Australia, because everything wants to kill you. But there are things out there that can and will kill you if given the opportunity. Coyotes will kill a person if you're down. Wolves, mountain lions, bears, even a black bear will kill a person under the right circumstances. Animals are dangerous, and nothing more dangerous out there than the greater North American meth head. You could stumble upon an illegal grow, or you could stumble upon a lab, and you might not walk out of it. Take basic survival equipment with you, even if you're planning on only being out there for a few hours, because sometimes a few hours can turn into a few days if you get off the trail and lose your directions. Take a compass, a physical compass. I recommend a lensatic compass. They are fantastic. I've got one attached to my pack. I've got one I've got one in the other pack. I mean, I got two or three of these things laying around. And it's LENSATIC, Lensatic Compass. You can get them on Amazon. They're not expensive. And you can even download the military manuals on how to properly use one. And it's land navigation is dying art because of the GPS. But because we got to remember, folks, technology will fail you when you need it the most. And you could be without signal on your cell phone. The battery could die. You could drop your phone in the water. Bloop. And then where are you? Up the esteemed estuary of excrement without sufficient means of locomotion. Doc liked that one apparently.
That's good. I like that. I like that.
So, take something like a life straw. Life straw you can fit it in a pack. It weighs next to nothing. And if you're out of water, you can drink directly out of a creek with that. It filters out even some radioactive elements. And they filter up to about 100,000 gallons. No, I think it's 10,000 gallons of water. Maybe it's 100,000. I'd have to double check. But they're cheap, $20, the one in your pack. I've got one in my pack. I think I got one in the car too. I also have a med kit in the car. Don't leave home without a med kit. And I'm not talking Band-Aids and Bactine. I'm talking a med kit. Take something with a tourniquet. Go to Dark Angel's YouTube page and watch the videos on how to use one if you've never used one, because that medical kit could be the difference between you or a loved one coming out of those woods alive.
Yes.
Even minor accidents can be fatal when you're off the grid.
And we had to use a tourniquet this past weekend.
You never know when that tourniquet's going to save your life. Keep one handy. Keep one on your belt if you're going to go hiking, or throw one in your pack. I always recommend Dark Angel kits because, one, I love Carrie to death. He's my brother from another mother. But also, I carried one of his kits as an active duty officer. I carried one up until my back went out and I couldn't do it anymore. I love those kits. And it's not just because Doc's my buddy. It's because they are the best kits I've ever encountered. And if you use one to save a life, even your own, they will resupply that kit for free for life. The kit for life guarantee. And to me, that was just something I couldn't overlook. I mean, there's nobody else does that.
Yep.
They're amazing kits. Get one. It could save your life.
Yeah.
I carry one on my duty vest every day.
Take your basic essentials. On Amazon, for like $5, you can get a pack of like a dozen Mylar blankets, space blankets, they call them. They will save your life in a pinch. They trap in a tremendous amount of body heat under cold conditions, and they also work good if you're trying to avoid FLIR.
Yep.
Who knew?
God forbid you need to avoid that. Surely enough, there's
Damn
lots
satellites.
of everyday solutions why you would need to avoid FLIR. But those blankets will save your life or somebody's life who's very, very cold or nearly hypothermic in a situation where you can't build a fire. Take something to start a fire. I recommend keeping like a little Ziploc bag of dryer lint, because you can tear off a chunk of that dryer lint and put it among leaves, and that stuff lights almost immediately. Another great trick: get cotton balls and take Vaseline, petroleum jelly, and work it into that cotton ball. Put them in a Ziploc bag. You take one of those cotton balls out and light it. It'll burn for quite a bit. Crayons burn for quite a bit. There are lots of things you can keep in your kit that are basic fire starting equipment. Be careful, folks. There are dangerous things out there. Take something to defend yourself. Even if you don't believe in firearms, take some pepper spray. You can buy bear spray online. I think Cabela's and Bass Pro both carry it. Or if you've got an outdoor store anywhere near you, or like a sporting goods store, a lot of them carry it, and it's not that expensive. Take a walking stick, something with a good club end on it that you can use. Take something to protect yourself, and above and beyond all else, come home safe.
Amen.
Because we're not just a bunch of morons here. We're a family, and we love each and every one of you guys joining us and taking the time to spend time with us. This was an awesome Wednesday night. We had, I think at the most, I saw 133 people. That is freaking awesome that 133 people took the time to spend the night with us and hang out and talk about Dogman. And again, we've laid all of this out. The breadcrumbs are there. You can do your own research and see we're not just blowing smoke. That is all out there. You make up your own mind. Come up with your own theories, because your theories are just as valid as mine. And who knows? You might be right. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying I'm a physical evidence guy, and I probably always will be. However, I keep the door open a crack for the possibilities of other things, because what's the old quote from Shakespeare? There are stranger things in this world than your science can explain, Horatio, or something along those lines.
Yep.
You don't know what's out there. We don't know. We don't have the answers. As humans, we like to think we do. And people that say that there's not habitat for Dogman or Bigfoot to exist,
No, Steve, it's not a snake weight.
go to Google Maps and do the satellite view and scroll out until you can see North America, and tell me how much unbroken green still exists on the North American continent. There is tons of habitat for creatures like this. From coast to coast and north to south, there's tons of habitat of unbroken, millions upon millions of acres. There's areas of the Mark Twain National Forest probably hasn't seen a human in 50 to 100 years, maybe even longer. There are parts of northern Canada and Alaska that probably never have seen a human. We have not explored all of our continent, let alone all of this planet. There are still mysteries yet to be solved, and this is one of them. Creatures like this exist, and the sooner people realize the evidence is there, the sooner they can be prepared for running into one. Because I'll tell you, nothing will change your life like walking around a corner of a trail and running into one of these things. Your entire worldview will change in a heartbeat.
Or sitting in your house where you think you're nice and safe, and looking out the door and seeing it looking at you.
Jeff Townsend says, I recommend a 10 millimeter loaded with hard cast for woodland ventures. I take that, and I have a Keltec KSG that's never far from hand. Richie Evans says there's 5 or 6 million white-tailed deer in our country. How often do you see them unless you live in a rural area? There are millions of deer. There are millions of elk, thousands upon thousands of buffalo. But how rarely do you actually see these things? And God knows how many freaking squirrels exist in North America, but you see those little bastards everywhere. We call them tree rats in Missouri, or chicken of the tree.
Chicken of the tree. I like that.
You'd be amazed where you draw the line when things get bad and you need to eat something.
Hey, chicken
of the tree's right on the menu, and I've had it many times.
Squirrel's not bad. I like squirrel.
Squirrel gravy. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Just got to make sure you get all the buckshot out.
Like their biscuits and gravy. Mm-hmm. But again, we're trying to wrap this up, and I get to talking on tangents. Thank you guys for so much for spending the night with us. I've said this many times. I will always continue to say it. We don't have fans. We have friends. We love having you guys. We love hanging out with you guys and talking about this stuff. And again, please check out my books at daroberts.net if you haven't done that. I would love for you to check out the books. All of my books are fiction, yet they are based upon years of research into the behavior of these creatures. So I've made the behaviors of the creatures as real as I can possibly make them. And what I say about the books, I also say about the show, and I also say about cryptid encounters. Stories are journeys that we take together. And I want to thank each and every one of you for taking that journey with us and for being part of the family here at DAX Machina. Good night, everybody. We'll keep you all in our prayers and our thoughts, and wish each and every one of you nothing but the very best in this world. Thank you for spending time with us. We do not have a show this Saturday. We will on a week from tonight on the Wednesday. But I'll be at a convention on Saturday, so there won't be one then. Again, thank you guys. I hope you guys have a wonderful night. Robbie, Doc, love you guys. Anthony, if you're listening, love you, brother. Sorry you couldn't be here tonight. And I hope you guys have a wonderful evening and a great weekend. And we will see you next Wednesday. Good night, everybody.
Night, everybody.
Thank you for joining us. Catch us again Wednesdays and Saturdays on DAX Machina. A special thanks to all our channel members and Patreon supporters. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe.